Chapter 384. Fang Qishao is very famous in Jianghu. He is ranked 3rd on the Longhu list and is known as a sword Dao genius rarely seen in a millennium. He started learning the sword at the age of 7 and learned all 4 major sword halls of Sword King City in 5 years. Even the sword instructors of Sword King City are ashamed of their inferiority. Chu Xiu also has a lot of enmity with Sword King City. Sword King City's outstanding disciple Lin Kaiyun, second only to Fang Qishao, had his state of mind damaged because of him. Moreover, Sword King City's elite disciple brilliant sword Fei Amo also had his cultivation crippled. Therefore, Chu Xiu wasn't surprised that Sword King City came looking for trouble with him. Just when Chu Xiu thought that Fang Qishao would issue a challenge in a domineering manner, Fang Qishao showed a helpless expression and said, "You should know why I came looking for you. In fact, I don't want to. I'm actually very lazy. Aside from practicing the sword, I don't want to do anything else. Lin Kaiyun has always been envious of my handsomeness, elegance, majesty, and unbridled nature. In Sword King City he always spoke ill of me. He's very stingy, so I don't want to take revenge for him. There's also Firmer. That guy is famous for having a foul mouth and giving himself such an unlucky name. I've already said it before. Who knows, maybe one day someone will find him an eyesore and conveniently cripple him. Now it seems that I have the potential to become a divination grandmaster. Right, what do you think about me going to Longhu Mountain to learn divination from those ox noses? I'm very familiar with Zhang Qingshan. Seeing that we're so familiar, Celestial Master Mansion shouldn't refuse me, right? I'm sorry I digressed. What I meant was that although I'm too lazy to avenge them, the people of my sect are forcing me to seek justice for that idiot. After all, I'm the most handsome disciple of this generation in Sword King City, so I have no choice but to shoulder this heavy burden. But I don't want to fight this kind of meaningless battle. How about this? Later on in the arena, I will use my sword 3 times and you will use your saber 3 times. Then you will pretend to be no match for me and we will both save our strength. What do you think? After all, you're ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard and I'm ranked 3rd. This proves that in terms of handsomeness, I'm better than you. It's not embarrassing for you to lose to me. I'll treat you to a meal after this. What do you think? Fang Qishao's mouth was even faster than his sword. After he finished speaking, both Chu Xiu and Xie Xiaolu were dumbstruck. Who would have thought, that the world-famous chief sword master Fang Qishao, who was known as the rare genius swordsman in 1,000 years, Fang Qishao, was actually a chatterbox and a joker? Xie Xiaolu was even more speechless. Who said that the tiger and dragon list was ranked according to one's handsomeness? If it was ranked that way, then Lu Fengxian would definitely be ranked first. Chu Xiu's ability to accept was a bit stronger. Geniuses always had some differences from ordinary people. It was just that this Fang Qishao was different from ordinary people in a big way. Seeing that Chu Xiu did not speak, Fang Qishao deliberately moved closer and widened his eyes. Don't think that I'm joking. I'm serious. If you don't believe me, look at my sincere eyes. I, Fang Qishao, am a man of my word. I never lie. The surrounding people could not listen to him at this time, especially the sword cultivators. Among the young disciples of the 5 major sword sects, the disciples of Hidden Sword Villa were relatively mediocre. Although the Forgetting Sword Hut and Storm Sword Mound had deep foundations, they had high requirements for their young disciples. Therefore, some of their disciples were not even released to roam the Jianghu. As for the Yu Palace's Yan Fian, she was a woman. Therefore, all the young sword cultivators in the world regarded Fang Qishao as their idol. However, now that they saw their idol in such a state, they felt like their dreams had collapsed and their hearts were shattered. On the Sword King City side, a middle-aged unity of heaven and man realm martial artist shouted angrily, "Fang Qishao, get the hell back here. If you dare say another word of nonsense today, I will immediately report to the sect and you will be confined for a year." The middle-aged martial artist covered his face, looking as if he had lost all face. He simply wanted to cry but had no tears. Look at Dragon Tiger Mountain's little heavenly master, Zhang Qingshan. Not only did he have the strength of a little heavenly master, but he also had the bearing of a little heavenly master. Anyone who had seen Zhang Qingshan would praise him. Look at Great Brightness Temple's wisdom king, Zhong Xian. He had been cultivating in the bitter cold of the far north all these years. When he came out to roam Jianghu, he exterminated evil and was praised by the people of Jianghu. Finally he looked back at Fang Qishao. How did their Sword King City cultivate such a thing? Although Fang Qishao's talent in Sword Dao was indeed peerless, he was worried about Sword King City's future. Was it really the right decision to hand Sword King City over to Fang Qishao? Fang Qishao shrugged helplessly at Chu Xiu and turned back to the Sword King City's side. The Sword King City's martial artist glared fiercely at Fang Qishao and said, "The World Sword Sect Conference is the key to our Sword King City's ascension to the top of the 5 major sword sects. Put away your mischievous look. Zhang Qingjun and Zhong Xian are not here. You are the leader of the younger generation. You must fight for our Sword King City's prestige. You are not allowed to hold back or throw the game, do you hear me?" Fang Qishao nodded listlessly. When the martial artist saw Fang Qishao's appearance, he couldn't help getting angry and shouted again, "Speak!" Seventh young master Fang pointed at his mouth and said with an aggrieved expression, "Didn't you say you wouldn't let me speak? If I speak, you'll go to master and complain about me. I don't want to be grounded." The martial artist covered his face and sat down. He waved his hand dispiritedly and didn't want to talk to Fang Qishao anymore. On Chu Xiu's side, Xie Xiaolu still couldn't react. Fang Qishao, who was ranked 3rd on the Longhu list, turned out to be like this. This completely subverted his imagination. At this moment, a deafening clang of a sword rang out in the middle of the training grounds. It shook the heavens and the earth, immediately causing the noise to stop. The ordinary-looking martial arts grandmaster from the sword hut walked onto the training grounds in the middle of the training grounds. He cupped his hands at the people around him and said loudly, "Welcome to the World Sword Sect Conference, everyone. If there is anything lacking in the hospitality, please forgive me." Seeing this ordinary-looking middle-aged martial artist stand out, there was another round of discussion below. This extremely ordinary-looking middle-aged martial artist's identity was not simple. He was the martial arts grandmaster of the Sword Hut, ranked 29th on the honor list, Kongming Sword Han Tingyi. There were not many people in the Sword Hut. There were actually less than 3,000 inner sect disciples, and the rest were outer sect disciples who did odd jobs. Even so, there were less than 10,000 people. Thus, Han Tingyi did not have any position in the Sword Hut. He was simply a martial arts grandmaster, responsible for teaching some disciples and handling some miscellaneous items. The martial artists of the Sword Hut cultivated the way of the sword. They comprehended sword intent, understood sword theory and practiced sword techniques. They progressed step by step and had an incomparably solid foundation. But at the same time, this also meant that the martial artists of the Sword Hut spent most of their time cultivating in seclusion, keeping a very low profile. This was the case for Han Tingyi. In his early years he had not even been on the Longhu list. By the time he left, he was already over 40 years old, only a step away from entering the realm of martial arts grandmasters. But when Han Tingyi stepped into the martial arts world for the first time, he shocked everyone with a single brilliant feat. This was because a disciple of the Sword Hut was killed by the Ghost King sect and dismembered to refined pills. Han Tingyi was ordered to avenge him. He hunted down an entire branch of the Ghost King sect, over 200 people, and killed over 10 Unity of Heaven realm martial artists. He brought back the remains of the Sword Hut disciple. After stepping into the martial arts grandmaster realm, Han Tingyi had consecutively defeated 2 of the 4 major sword hall masters of Sword King City. His might was boundless. This seemingly ordinary middle-aged man's strength was very extraordinary. Sending Han Tingyi to host the World Sword Sect Conference was already very important. In the past, when there were not so many people, the hosts were all Unity of Heaven realm martial artists. Han Tingyi said in a deep voice, "The World Sword Sect Conference is a grand event of my sword lineage. Since ancient times, the sword has been the leader of all weapons. Now that my sword lineage is prosperous, we can host the World Sword Sect Conference. Everyone can exchange pointers and make my sword lineage even more glorious." Han Tingyi's words made some of the martial artists present who did not use swords feel a little uncomfortable. What did he mean by the sword was the leader of all weapons? Did he mean that those who used other weapons were inferior? However, although these people felt a little indignant, they had to admit a fact. In the current martial arts world, martial artists who cultivated the sword indeed had the advantage and the majority. For example, there were 5 major sword sects in the martial arts world, but there were no 5 major saber sections. The other martial artists who used spears, rods and other strange weapons were even more of a minority. Han Tingyi continued, "This time, there are so many martial artists participating in the World Sword Sect Conference. As for the rules, they naturally have to change. The conference is divided into 3 rounds. The first round is a spar between the younger generation martial artists. In the martial arts world, a single tree does not make a forest. The younger generation martial artists represent the future. It is the future of the martial arts world. Therefore, this round is arranged at the very front. The second round is a spar between martial arts grandmasters. Martial arts itself is the way of fighting and killing. Without fighting, it is impossible to talk on paper. Even martial arts grandmasters cannot work behind closed doors. In the first 2 rounds, be it sword cultivators or martial artists from other sects present, everyone can participate. As for the last round, it will be a discussion of the sword. Our 5 great sword sects will each send a grandmaster to explain the sword Dao. If there are any mistakes or inaccuracies, please point them out and correct them. When Han Tingyi finished speaking, the ones who were the most excited were the martial artists who were rogue cultivators. They did not come to the World Sword Sect Conference with the intention of entering the arena. That kind of place was not something they could go to. These people came for the last round, where those martial arts grandmasters would explain the Tao. The World Sword Sect Conference was a rare event that happened once in 100 years. It was their honor to be able to encounter it. After all, it was a martial arts grandmaster explaining the Tao. Normally they would not have such an opportunity. At this moment Han Tingyi's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He said, "Since it is an arena competition, there must be a prize. Our 5 major sword sects have also come up with a few prizes this time. We are prepared to give it to the winner of the younger generation and the martial arts grandmasters from the 5 major sword sections." As he spoke, Han Tingyi waved his hand and immediately, a few things were carried up. Chapter 385. The 5 great sword sects could be said to have put in a lot of effort for this World Sword Sect Conference. They had taken out a lot of good things. The rewards that were brought up were covered with red cloth. Han Tingyi lifted the first red cloth. Inside was a sword, a secret box and a bottle of pills. Han Tingyi pointed to the sword whose hilt was black but whose blade was scarlet red, and said in a deep voice, "This sword is a top grade 6 precious weapon, Scarlet Demon, ranked 65th in the world-famous sword manual. In the past, it was the personal weapon of a devil envoy of the Kunlun devil cult. Now it has been cleansed of its demonic qi, it still retains its fiendish blood aura, its power has not decreased much, it is still sharp. In the younger generation's arena competition, the first prize is this Scarlet Demon sword." Han Tingyi pointed to the secret box and said, "This is a secret box that my forgotten sword Hut obtained after attacking the Kunlun devil cult. It was found in the Kunlun devil cult's martial arts library. Inside is a set of demonic path martial arts Great Devil Blood Technique and Blood Transformation Divine Blade. The combination of the 2 is at the 7th rank. But the people who came to participate in the World Sword Sect Conference are all righteous path people, so my forgotten sword Hut temporarily sealed the incomparably evil Great Devil Blood Technique. Inside is only the Blood Transformation Divine Blade, it can be used as a trump card at a critical moment, it is the prize for the 2nd place. The last bottle of pills contains the Kunlun Devil Cult's secret pill, Withered Would Give Spring Pill. It is refined from the Kunlun Devil Cult's rootless sacred flame, it is a holy healing medicine, it is the prize for the 3rd place." After Han Tingyi finished introducing these things, Chushio did not feel anything, but he knew that Mr. Liu and the other Kunlun Devil Cult martial artists hiding in the dark probably wanted to swallow Han Tingyi alive. Han Tingyi or the entire 5 great sword sects were simply provoking the people of the hidden devil cult. The top 3 prizes they took out were all seized from the hands of the Kunlun devil cult in the past. In other words, these were all spoils of war, but they were the shame of the Kunlun devil cult. Now they took out these things as rewards. If this wasn't provocation, then what was? However, Mr. Liu and the others naturally wouldn't act up now, because the bigger provocation was yet to come. The expression on Han Tingyi's face did not change. He pointed at the last item wrapped in red cloth and said in a deep voice, "Martial Dao masters don't care about these small things, so we only prepared one reward for the winner. That is the symbol of the Kunlun devil cult in the past, which is also the symbol of the orthodox demonic path, the demonic creation flag." As soon as Han Ting lifted the red cloth, a powerful demonic aura instantly soared into the sky. It was so terrifying that it seemed to cover the sky and cover the sun. There should be a formation set up on the red cloth. Otherwise, it would be impossible to suppress such a powerful aura. Everyone focused their eyes and saw that under the red cloth was a tattered flag. As Han Ting raised the flag, everyone could clearly see the true appearance of the flag. The flag was only about 30 feet tall, and the flagpole was pitch black in color. There were sword scars on it and it looked incomparably ancient. While the body of the flag could still flutter in the wind, it was extremely damaged as though it could shatter at any moment. Originally, the body of the flag should have been pitch black in color, with all kinds of mysterious seal scripts and diagrams drawn on it with golden patterns. But now not a single complete seal could be seen. Everyone present had strange expressions. This was the symbol of the former demonic path, the demonic creation flag that represented the orthodox demonic path. The martial Dao grandmasters from the large sects all knew what the 5 great sword sects meant this time. Seeing that they really took out the demonic creation flag, the 5 great sword sects were really determined to suppress the demonic path. The other wandering cultivators stared with all their might. This was the demonic creation flag that represented the former Kunlun devil cult. It was a legendary existence. If they took a few more glances, they would have something to brag about in the future. As for sects like the Ba Mountain Sword sect, they were unperturbed and did not move at all. The demonic creation flag was of no use to them at all. Instead, it was a hot potato. They would not want it even if it was given to them. In the present world, only existences like the 5 great sword sects or the Buddhist and Taoist sects could keep the demonic creation flag. If it was left in the hands of others, they would be attacked by a large group of demonic cultivators the next day and torn to pieces. Because the arena in the center of the practice field was very large, it was divided into 10 parts by the people of the Sword Hut. It could accommodate 10 groups of people to compete at the same time. In the Sword Sect Conference of the World, the arena competition was just an accessory, especially since the 5 great sword sects had held this sword sect conference with a different goal this time. So the rules were not so strict. Anyone who wanted to go on stage could sign up and start competing at will. They could also challenge each other. But after each round of challenge, the challenged person had the right to rest for a round and recover their strength. This could prevent people from taking turns to fight and deliberately tricking one person. The last rule was newly set by the Sword Sect Conference of the World. In the past, this kind of thing would not happen because the people who participated were warriors from the 5 great sword sects. For them, if anyone dared to play such underhanded tricks in the arena, they would lose their reputation. But this time, there were many outsiders participating in the Sword Sect Conference of the World. It was somewhat out of control, so the 5 great sword sects could only add some new rules to control it. Xia Xiaolu stood beside Chu Xiu and asked, "Brother Chu, are you going to participate in the arena?" Among the other sects, those who represented their sects to participate in the Sword Sect Conference of the World were definitely warriors at the unity of the world realm. The core strength of the sects were almost all not young, so they naturally could not go on stage to compete. But Chu Xiu was an exception. He came to represent the Guanzhong torture room, but his age was that of a warrior of the younger generation, so he naturally had the right to go on stage. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Why wouldn't I want the benefits that are delivered to my doorstep? I can also train my own strength at the same time." "Brother Chu, you use a saber. You also have your eyes on the Scarlet Demon Sword?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course not. I only want the blood-dissipating saber. I don't have any extravagant hopes of being number 1. You have also seen that fellow Fang Qishao. Although he is a little unreliable, his cultivation in the way of the sword can be said to be terrifying. Furthermore, Fang Qishao has already stepped into the unity of the world realm. Although I have killed more than 1 or 2 warriors of this realm, compared to Fang Qishao, the difference between these people is simply like the difference between clouds and mud. If we don't fight to the death, the current me is not sure that I can beat Fang Qishao. But to be a little arrogant, besides Fang Qishao, among the younger generation of warriors here, who is qualified to fight with me?" Xia Xiaolu thought about it and it really made sense. If Chu Xiu wanted to fight for first place, it might be a little difficult to fight with Fang Qishao, but if he wanted to fight for second place, it would be even easier than Fang Qishao fighting for first place because no one dared to fight with Chu Xiu. The arenas in all directions opened at the same time, and those who wanted to participate in the arena or challenge could directly enter the arena to start the competition. The 5 martial Dao Grand Masters of the 5 major sword sects stood on the high ground. On the surface, they were protecting the warriors who participated in the arena, but they were secretly monitoring to see if those demonic rats would secretly attack them. On the arena of the martial arts field, the 10 groups of people were fighting in full swing. They had been changed back and forth several times, but those who could still stay in the arena were almost all famous heroes of the younger generation. After Chu Xiu entered the arena, he went through 3 rounds. In fact, in these 3 rounds, Chu Xiu did not even fight. The people in those 3 rounds happened to be people of Eastern Qi. After knowing the identity of Chu Xiu, they directly turned around and fled. In the land of Eastern Qi, Chu Xiu was quite famous. Basically, there were only 2 outcomes for those who had anything to do with Chu Xiu. One was to die and the other was to live a life worse than death. In the arena, Chu Xiu was relatively dazzling. Almost all of his opponents were defeated without a fight. This made the warriors of West Chu and Northern Yen feel a little strange. Weren't the warriors of Eastern Qi a little too cowardly? They didn't even fight and they withdrew? It should be known that this was the arena of the World Sword Sect Conference. Everyone came with the intention of learning from each other. Generally they would not fight to the death. Fighting was just to hone their own strength. What were they afraid of? In fact, the warriors of Eastern Qi were indeed a little frightened by Chu Xiu's behavior. Those who went against him were basically dead or crippled. Although they also knew that this was the World Sword Sect Conference and Chu Xiu did not dare to go too far, no one was willing to guarantee it with their lives. Looking at the other young martial artists who were on the Dragon and Tiger list, they seemed to be fighting quite well. Although the seventh young Master Fong was somewhat unreliable, he was not ruthless in his attacks. Almost none of the warriors who had fought with him had been able to withstand more than 3 strikes from him. However, at the same time, his opponents had also benefited greatly. When the others saw that Fang Qixiao did not kill them, they all gathered at Fang Qixiao's side, wanting to take the opportunity to fight with him to learn a few moves. Later Fang Qixiao also felt annoyed. He directly erupted with his strongest strength and defeated his opponent with 1 move. It was simple and easy so the other warriors could not see anything. Only then did the disappointed crowd change their direction. In addition to Fang Qixiao, Nie Donglio's performance was also very exciting. Nie Donglu had already practiced the Nie family's Heaven and Earth Cloud hand to an extremely proficient level. Later he followed Han Baxin to practice fist martial arts. His strength was even better than before. There were few warriors who could withstand more than 3 moves from him. However, Fang Qixiao could not be bothered to give pointers to the warriors who fought with him. On the other hand, Nie Donglu patiently gave pointers to every warrior who fought with him and lost to him, earning him a good reputation. In addition to Chu Xiu and the others, Yu Palace's Yan Fian, Xia Xiaolu and the others on the arena also performed very well. As long as one was on the Longhu list, when facing ordinary warriors of the same level, they had a huge advantage. But now, when some people saw Chu Xiu's glorious appearance, they felt extremely unbalanced. Chapter 386. Looking at Chu Xiu's prowess in the arena, the one who was mentally unbalanced was Xiahou Wujiang. This time he also followed his father, Xiahou Zhen, to participate in the World Sword Sect Conference. Xiahou Zhen brought Xiahou Wujiang here to let him see the world and increase his seniority. According to Xiahou Zhen, in the future, the Xiahou clan would definitely be handed over to Xiahou Wujiang, and their branch must be reappointed as the family head. The death of 7th uncle last time was a huge blow to Xiahou Wujiang, even more than when Chana was killed by Chu Xiu. Chan was just a maid of Xiahou Wujiang. To put it bluntly, she was just one of his many women. Now that one of them died, Xiahou Wujiang didn't feel any pain, only anger. But 7th uncle was an elder who watched him grow up, and was also one of Xiahou Zhen's confidants. Now that he died because of him, this blow was extraordinarily heavy for Xiahou Wujiang. Therefore, since the last time, Xiahou Wujiang changed his habits and became somewhat taciturn. He actually took the initiative to ask for no hardship cultivation, which made Xiahou Zhen feel somewhat gratified. At least his son could still be saved. Because Chu Xiu was between the northern Yan and West Chu people, he didn't see anyone from Eastern Qi's side, so Xiahou Wujiang and Chu Xiu didn't meet. But at this time, Xiahou Wujiang saw that Chu Xiu was so glorious on the arena, almost subduing the enemy without a fight, which made Xiahou Wujiang feel extremely unbalanced. Xiahou Zhen felt that Xiahou Wujiang was strange and he said indifferently, "What? Not convinced? The people of Jianghu can take and let go. Chu Xiu has the strength, so he has the qualifications to be glorious now. Don't forget what old Seven told you before, don't provoke Chu Xiu without absolute certainty. Now is not the time to touch Chu Xiu. The strength of the Guanzhong torture room isn't weak, but it has been hiding and keeping a low profile all these years so it hasn't been noticed by others. The last time I lost to Guan Xiu, it was my miscalculation. Guan Xiu is even about to break through to the true Fire Soul refinement realm. With the protection of the Guanzhong torture room, unless I could seize the power of the Xiahou family and completely control it, I wouldn't be able to suppress the Guanzhong torture room with my current power. I'm still going to say the same thing. You can take it easy and let it go. There's no rush to take revenge now. You have to look forward and not be obsessed with this little grudge." Xiahou Wujiang looked coldly at Chu Xiu in the arena, nodded and said, "I know, father. I won't go into the arena this time." Although Xiahou Wujiang deeply hated Chu Xiu, he also knew his own capabilities. At this time he didn't have the confidence to challenge Chu Xiu in the arena, and he also didn't have the confidence to face Yan Fian of the Yu Palace. It could only be said that he had a 50-50 chance. There was also that Nye Donglu. Although most people in the Jianghu knew that Nye Donglu was a scheming person, and his methods were more famous than his strength, Nye Donglu had been in seclusion for 2 years, and he had even become the disciple of the northern Yanjianghu's tyrant Han Baxian. Xiahou Wujiang also didn't have the confidence to defeat him. As for facing Fang Qishao, he didn't even have the confidence to block 3 of Fang Qishao's swords. The 2 of them weren't existences of the same realm and level at all. The arena competition of the World Sword Sect Conference was just a spar. Although it wasn't that serious, there were still so many people watching. With Xiahou Wujiang's status, if he didn't have the confidence to enter the top 3, then he should forget it. He would only be humiliating himself if he went up. However, Xiahou Wujiang wasn't willing to just watch Chu Xiu continue to show off here. He coldly snorted, stood up, and walked towards the northern Yan side. Xiahou Zhen frowned and said, "What are you going to do? Didn't you hear what I said just now?" Xiahou Wujiang said in a deep voice, "Father, don't worry. I won't go up to the arena to compete with Chu Xiu. It's just that I don't want Chu Xiu to win too easily. I believe that many people will be happy to see this happen." Hearing Xiahou Wujiang say this, Xiahou Zhen thought about it and didn't continue to say anything. He only hoped that Xiahou Wujiang could be more steady. However, if he was too steady, steadiness would become timidity. This wasn't a good thing, so Xiahou Zhen didn't stop him. Xiahou Wujiang walked straight to the northern Yan side and arrived in front of the monks from the Great Light Temple. With a smile on his face, he cupped his hands and said, "Xiahou Wujiang greets the masters." Su Yan glanced at Xiahou Wujiang, put his palms together and returned the greeting. "So it's the young master of the Xiahou clan. You're too polite." The Great Light Temple was far away in the northern Yan, while the Xiahou clan was in eastern Qi. The 2 sides actually didn't have much contact. However, the Xiahou clan was one of the 9 great families, and it was the kind that ranked at the top. Su Yan would still give Xiahou Wujiang face. "I wonder what young Master Xiahou is here for?" Su Yan asked directly. He was a martial arts grandmaster level powerhouse, the Vajra institution's master. He naturally wasn't willing to play any tricks with a junior martial artist like Xiahou Wujiang. It would be more appropriate if it was Xiahou Zhen instead. Xiahou Wujiang pointed at Chu Xiu on the arena and said in a clear voice, "Masters, back in the sky-reaching tower, when Chu Xiu tortured and killed your temple's great master Ming Chen, I was also present. Chu Xiu's attack was ruthless and decisive. Although I didn't have any friendship with great master Ming Chen, I still admired the reputation of the Great Light Temple's masters. I wanted to stop him, but it was too late and great master Ming Chen was killed. During the sky-reaching tower battle, an elder who had taken care of me since I was young also died at the hands of Chu Xiu. However, I deeply hate myself for being useless and not being able to avenge my 7th uncle. Even if my father made a move, he was defeated by Guan Siyu of the Guanzhong torture room. This time, the masters have brought so many masters to the World Sword Sect Conference. I believe that great master Ming Chen definitely won't die in vain. The masters will definitely not let Chu Xiu continue to be so arrogant." As soon as Xiahou Wujiang said this, the Great Light Temple's martial artists immediately became excited. Moreover, Xiahou Wujiang's voice was not soft. The surrounding people also heard Xiahou Wujiang's words and looked at the people from the Great Light Temple. Looking at Xiahou Wujiang, Su Yan's expression immediately became gloomy. He never thought that this junior from the Xiahou clan would dare to provoke the Great Light Temple. Originally, the Great Light Temple was not prepared to make a move at the World Sword Sect Conference. However, with Xiahou Wujiang's provocation, the disciples who had previously quietened down became excited again. Moreover, Xiahou Wujiang's words were also secretly hinting to the others that the Great Light Temple would not dare to make a move against Chu Xiu. Similarly, their own people had died at the hands of Chu Xiu, but their Xiahou clan dared to go to the Guanzhong torture room to demand justice. Even if Xiahou Zhen was defeated by Guan Siyu in the end, at least their Xiahou clan dared to make a move and would not disappoint their own people. However, in contrast to the people from the Great Light Temple, they did not make a move. In this way, the Great Light Temple indeed appeared somewhat cold. Of course, no one would say that the Great Light Temple was too weak. The Kunlun Devil cult had been destroyed. In this world, no one could make the Great Light Temple retreat. However, the surrounding martial artists looked at Su Yan and the others somewhat differently. Their own disciples had been killed, and the enemy was right in front of them. Regardless of whether they could kill the other party, it was normal for them to at least show some expression. However, the Great Light Temple turned a blind eye to it. This group of monks was truly cold. Su Yan looked coldly at Xiahou Wujiang and said in a low voice, "How dare you? Xiahou Wujiang smiled and said, Master Su Yan is too serious. I was just speaking the truth. I have no intention of harming the Great Light Temple. At this time Su Du, who had not spoken all this while, put away his lazy expression. His expression was frighteningly gloomy. An aura erupted from his body, pressing down on Xiahou Wujiang's body like a mountain. It immediately caused him to break out in a cold sweat, and he could not help but want to kneel down. However, Xiahou Wujiang was forcefully holding on at this time. If he were to kneel down in front of everyone, he would lose a lot of face. However, the coercion of a martial Dao Grandmaster was not so easy to resist. Xiahou Wujiang had unleashed all of his strength, but he still could not resist Shudu's coercion. Even the bones all over his body were creaking. Just as Xiahou Wujiang was about to be unable to resist, a golden light enveloped his body, canceling out Su Du's pressure. Xiahou Zhen appeared beside Xiahou Wujiang at some point. He cupped his hands at Su Du and Su Yan and said, I have not taught my son well and have offended the two masters. Please forgive me. Su Du put away his pressure and snorted coldly. Xiahou Zhen, it is not that you have not taught your son well. You have taught a good son. These little tricks are quite smooth, just like you when you were young. However, did you not teach him that playing these little tricks also depends on the person? This is the World Sword Sect Conference and I am giving face to the 5 major sword sections. Otherwise, believe it or not, I will twist his head off. Being ridiculed by Su Du, Xiahou Zhen still had a smile on his face. Master Su Du is right. This kind of thing will not happen again. After saying that, Xiahou Zhen directly grabbed Xiahou Wujiang and left. The smile on his face also became extremely gloomy at that moment. Returning to the Xiahou clan's side, Xiahou Zhen snorted coldly. You want to scheme against Chu Xiu? Fine, but who asked you to provoke the Great Light Temple? Are you looking for death? Xiahou Wujiang wiped the cold sweat off his head and said with a smile, Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I just provoked a little, not harming the Great Light Temple. Even if they are angry, what can they do? The Great Light Temple is far away in the northern Yin and has no direct relationship with the Xiahou clan. They cannot threaten the interests of the Xiahou clan. Moreover, this is the World Sword Sect Conference and I am a junior. At most, the other party will just teach me a lesson. Using a lesson in exchange for the Great Light Temple finding trouble with Chu Xiu, this is a very good deal. In fact, Xiahou Wujiang had always been very clear in his heart. Since he dared to provoke the Great Light Temple, then he must have thought of the consequences beforehand. However, Xiahou Zhen sneered. Good deal? If you want to provoke, you also have to look at the target. Do you really think that Su Du saying that he would twist your head off was said in a moment of anger? If I wasn't here today, if you said anything more, Su Du would really dare to disregard the Xiahou clan's face and twist your head off. Chapter 387. Xiahou Zhen's words made Xiahou Wujiang look stunned. It was a big taboo for a senior martial artist to attack a junior martial artist. Even when Xiahou Zhen went to the Guanzhong torture room to ask for Su Du, it was all under the excuse of seeking justice for seventh uncle. He did not believe that Su Du, the head of the Shaolin Temple's Kongji Zen Hall and a well-known martial Dao grandmaster, would openly attack a junior martial artist like him. Xiahou Zhen sneered, You juniors don't even understand the matters of the underworld. What kind of people don't exist in the underworld? Some people follow the rules but some people don't. Su Du is the head of the Kongji Zen Hall, but do you know what his nickname was in the past? Monk Sanfeng. This guy was powerful and talented. Among the Su generation in the Shaolin Temple in terms of talent, he was second only to the abbot Su Ci and the head of the Wangyan Zen Hall, Su Yun. However, this monk was an out-and-out lunatic. He had once gone crazy 3 times a day and no one could stop him. He had even dared to point at the nose of the previous abbot and curse 18 generations of his ancestors. He had almost been expelled from the Temple of Great Light. After Su Ci took charge of the Great Light Temple, Su Du became much more well-behaved. Although he was the head of the Kongji Zen Hall, he did not care about the matters of the Kongji Zen Hall. With this guy's personality, do you think he was joking when he said he would break your head? He even dared to curse the previous abbot. What else would he not dare to do? Remember, you must not provoke this kind of madman. He is not an existence that can be measured with common sense. Xiahou Wujiang nodded, but he was also covered in cold sweat. It was better to be careful when playing tricks with a martial Dao grandmaster. Otherwise, it was easy to die without even knowing how. But Xiahou Wujiang did not regret it because his words had worked. On the Great Light Temple's side, Xiahou Wujiang's provocation naturally could not be hidden from Su Du and Su Yan. The two of them did not care, but the other younger disciples of the Great Light Temple exploded. The Great Light Temple was the leader of the North Buddhist sect. As a Buddhist sect, although they were not too overbearing when dealing with other sects, they would not allow others to humiliate them. Just like what Xiahou Wujiang had said, allowing Chu Xiu to strut around in the arena was an insult to the Great Light Temple, and it also disappointed their disciples. Therefore, a martial artist in his 30s who was from the Ming generation, ignored Su Yan's advice and walked into the ring shouting, "Disciple of the Temple of Great Light, Ming Cheng, challenges the Guanzhong torture room's Chu Xiu." As soon as he said that, everyone present was stunned and turned to look at Chu Xiu and Ming Cheng. Although there was a challenge mechanism in the arena of the World Sword Sect Conference, a few rounds had already passed and no one had taken the initiative to challenge anyone. The World Sword Sect meets arena is not intense. Most of them are just sparring. Looking at the few people in the arena, it was obvious that Fang Qishao had no intention to fight at all. He was just doing his job. Yan Fian was the same. Because she was a disciple of the Yu Palace, she wanted to win a good ranking for the Yu Palace. Nie Donglu even used the opportunity of the arena to buy people's hearts. The time he spent giving pointers to his opponents was longer than the time he spent fighting with them. As for Chu Xiu, the great battle between the righteous and demonic paths was about to begin. He was prepared to reap some benefits before it began, so he did not have any intention to fight. Therefore, things like challenging a specific person did not happen. The World Sword Sect meet was not a place to settle grudges. However, now that Mingqing had taken the initiative to challenge, this situation was broken. Everyone could see that Mingqing's aggressive manner was not a good one. Su Yin frowned and immediately wanted to stop him, but he was stopped by Su Du. Su Du said lazily, "That kid has already stood out. What's the use of stopping him? Fight, it's better to let them go. This bunch of kids are angry. If you don't let them fight, who knows, they might even secretly attack later." Su Yin frowned and said, "But what if something goes wrong? Chu Xiu is famous for being ruthless and decisive. Also, I promised senior brother Su Yun that I would not pursue this matter anymore." Su Du's expression turned serious, which was rare. He stared at Su Yan and said, "Junior brother, after being in charge of the Vajra institution for so many years, your Vajra temper has been worn away. Have you forgotten the rules of the pugilistic world? In the pugilistic world, either you are beaten to death by others, or you can only beat others to death. If you don't have the strength, then don't stand out. Can you protect them for a lifetime? Although you and I have shaved our tongues and become monks, the Great Light Temple itself is in the pugilistic world. Some rules will not change. If these junior martial artists want to fight, just let them go. Life and death are up to fate. At least your spirit is still there." Su Yan hesitated and said, "Then what about senior brother Su Yun?" Su Du instantly regained his lazy attitude and said calmly, "Go and explain. I don't want to deal with him." Looking at Su Du, Su Yan was speechless. However, he did not stop those disciples. There were martial arts masters from the 5 major sword sects around. Although he could not guarantee the absolute safety of the Great Light Temple's disciples, he could at least guarantee their lives. Since they wanted to go, then he would let them go. At that moment on the arena, Han Tingyi frowned slightly. However, he did not say much. Instead, he asked Chu Xiu directly, "Do you accept the challenge from the Great Light Temple's Mingqing?" The arena of the World Sword Sect Conference was not that intense. Although one could challenge, the challenger had to accept it first. Chu Xiu looked at the Great Light Temple and Xiahou clan's side, and a cold look flashed in his eyes. Because of Chu Xiu's previous fierce reputation, his opponents immediately surrendered when it was his turn. Chu Xiu could only stand on the arena and wait for the next round. He saw Xiahou Wujiang's actions when he came to look for the Great Light Temple. However, because he was too far away, he did not hear clearly what the other party said. However, when Xiahou Wujiang just left, someone from the Great Light Temple came to challenge him. Clearly, Xiahou Wujiang did not say anything nice. Thinking of this, Chu Xiu could not help but reveal waves of murderous intent in his eyes. Xiahou Wujiang was like a fly, always trying to find some trouble for him. Although it wasn't too big and couldn't threaten his life, it was still very annoying. Therefore, Chu Xiu already had a plan in mind. If there were no problems, even if he, Xiahou Wujiang, did not go on the arena, he would not be able to walk out of this floating jade mountain. Seeing that Chu Xiu did not speak, Han Tingyi coughed and added, "The World Sword Sect Conference is only for exchanging pointers. It's fine if you don't want to accept the challenge. Just wait for the next round." The 5 major sword sects only wanted to lure the demonic sects to attack this time. As for other matters, it was better to avoid trouble. It was best if Chu Xiu did not agree, otherwise, it would be troublesome if he caused any trouble. However, Chu Xiu grinned and said, "Since the Great Light Temple wants to fight, I naturally can't be a wet blanket, right? I accept." As soon as this was said, most of the warriors present immediately looked at Chu Xiu. The other matches were too boring. There was no sense of urgency of fighting in the arena. Now there was finally something exciting. This also made the warriors present excited. Mingqing walked onto the arena with a cold expression. His aura gradually solidified, and a faint golden aura bloomed around him. The pressure was actually infinitely close to the unity of heaven and man realm. The disciples of the Great Light Temple had always been low-key. This was publicly acknowledged in the pugilistic world. Mingqing was a disciple of the Vajra institution. He was of the same generation as Mingchen, who died in the hands of Chu Xiu. However, he was younger than Mingchen and his strength was also superior. Normally, a disciple of Mingqing's level could be nurtured as a future successor in other sections. However, in the Great Light Temple, Mingqing was not considered ordinary, but he could only be considered an ordinary elite disciple. There were not many disciples like this in the Great Light Temple, but they were not few either. The 3 major Zen halls and the 6 major martial institutions could find more than a dozen of them. Therefore, even though Mingqing could only be said to be a nobody in the pugilistic world and had not even been on the Longhu leaderboard, his strength was not inferior to the elites on the leaderboard. It was just that he was slightly older. Looking at the murderous Mingqing and the indifferent Chu Xiu, Han Tingyi shook his head helplessly and said, "Since both of you are willing, then make your move. However, let me reiterate that the arena of the World Sword Sect Conference is only used for sparring, not for you to kill each other and settle your grudges. You must remember this. Otherwise, if things get out of hand, it won't look good for anyone." Chu Xiu smiled and nodded. "Senior Han, don't worry. I'm familiar with the rules of the arena competition. Nothing will go wrong." When Chu Xiu said this, the martial artists from West Chu and Northern Yen did not feel anything. However, the martial artists from Eastern Qi, especially those who had participated in the God Weapon Conference, all had strange expressions on their faces. They did not forget that when Chu Xiu had participated in the God Weapon Conference in Eastern Qi, Qing Tingfeng of the Hidden Sword Villa had intercepted him and prevented him from killing Shen Bai. However, Chu Xiu had still dared to cripple Shen Bai under the pressure of a martial arts master. His guts were not ordinary. Now, Chu Xiu said that he was familiar with the rules of the arena. Familiar with what? Familiar with how to kill someone under the nose of a martial arts master? However, Han Tingyi did not know about this. He was a martial arts master, so of course he would not care about the messy matters between the younger martial artists. Hearing this, Han Tingyi only nodded and said, "If that's the case, then do it." With that, Mingqing was just about to point at Chu Xiu and say something when he saw Chu Xiu wave his hand and say, "Cut the crap. I originally thought that the Great Light Temple would keep its promise and let this matter go, but who would have thought that you monks would go back on your word? If that's the case, what else is there to say? I just hope that you won't regret it in the end." Chapter 388. Chu Xiu's words caused Mingqing to swallow back all the words he wanted to say. Actually, at this point it was meaningless to say who was right and who was wrong. Chu Xiu's style was to kill whoever wanted to kill him. It was that simple and direct. As for Mingqing, his senior brother had been killed, but they were forced by the elders of the sect not to take revenge. This made him feel very aggrieved and he could not help but want to make a move. Mingqing took back what he wanted to say. He only snorted and said, "My Great Light Temple does not go back on our words. It was my personal decision to challenge you in the arena. It has nothing to do with the Great Light Temple. Moreover, this is the World Sword Sect Conference. I just want to challenge you. What can't I?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "What's the use of saying so many useless excuses? Just make a move. You monks are too straightforward. Be more straightforward. The winner will stand and the loser will scram. It's that simple." Mingqing's eyes revealed a hint of anger and he snorted, "If you want to die, I'll grant your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, Mingqing's body flashed with dazzling golden gang qi. As it rotated, it was as if Vajra had descended to the world, burning with raging flames as he punched at Chu Xiu. The Great Light Temple had countless precious Buddhist secret scriptures. Among them, the most famous secret scripture of the Vajra department was the Furious Vajra Heart Sutra. This body-tempering technique could be said to be top-notch, but its only disadvantage was that it affected a warrior's state of mind too much. This also caused most of the warriors from the Vajra department to be hot-tempered and impulsive. Of course, if one could suppress the anger in one's heart, It was equivalent to completely mastering the true meaning of the Furious Vajra Heart Sutra. It was just like the current Vajra department's first seat. He was not so impulsive, and his personality became very rational. Regardless of whether it was Ming Chen who had died at the hands of Chu Xiu or Ming Cheng, they had not reached this level, so they could not help but be rash and impulsive in their actions. However, this was not a big deal. In a real battle, the anger of the Heart Sutra of Furious Vajra would burn to the extreme, and its power would be extremely powerful. Just like now, Ming Cheng's punch shook the arena and made a series of explosions. Its power was comparable to that of a great master in the unity of heaven and man realm. Strictly speaking, Cheng was a martial art practitioner from the previous generation. It was just that he was relatively young, not even in his 40s. It was normal for him to be included in the younger generation of martial art practitioners. After all, the seniority in the Temple of Great Light had always been very messy. There were even martial art practitioners in the Su generation who were in their 20s. However, even though Ming Cheng was young, his cultivation was deep, and he was even stronger than Ming Chen of the past. As his fist descended, Buddhist light suppressed all evil and annihilated the devil. Its might was incomparably powerful. Chu Xiu's figure did not move. His hand formed the great Vajra wheel seal, and a similarly blinding Buddhist light exploded from his hand. It made Chu Xiu look like a Vajra that could subdue demons, and his might was incomparably powerful. Everyone present was stunned. Why did Chu Xiu's attainments in Buddhist techniques seem to be stronger than Ming Cheng's? The great Vajra wheel seal collided with Ming Cheng's fist, and an ear-piercing sonic boom was heard. If it were not for the matrix that the sword hut had prepared for the arena, the two's attacks would have been enough to shatter the entire arena. After the loud sonic boom, Chu Xiu's figure did not move, but Ming Cheng could not help but take a step back. His eyes were filled with shock. In the northern Buddha sect's Temple of Great Light, Ming Cheng was proud of his own strength. In the end, he discovered that Chu Xiu's strength was even greater than his. Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He still formed the great Vajra wheel seal in his hand and struck out once again. Out of all of Chu Xiu's techniques, the great Vajra divine power was definitely not the strongest. However, for Chu Xiu at his current stage, it was the one that was the most helpful. The martial arts that Chu Xiu cultivated could be said to be extremely diverse. Before he had the great Vajra divine power, Chu Xiu's vital qi and mental energy were not weak. The only thing he was lacking was the strength of his physical body. This was the effect of the wooden bucket. The amount of water a bucket could hold depended on its shortest piece of wood. When Chu Xiu successfully made up for his shortest piece of wood, Chu Xiu was truly invulnerable. There was not a single flaw that could be picked out in any area. Furthermore, when he was cultivating the great Vajra divine power in seclusion, Chu Xiu had even refined half of the beast's heart. This caused Chu Xiu's strength to increase greatly. Even if he were to compete with the Great Light Temple's warriors in terms of strength, he still had the upper hand. When the second great Vajra wheel seal landed, Ming Cheng gritted his teeth. The Vajra shadow behind him bloomed, and a powerful Buddhist light condensed into a swastika seal to forcefully resist Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel seal. Another loud boom was heard, and Ming Cheng immediately took another step back. Chu Xiu seemed to only know the great Vajra wheel seal. No matter what Ming Cheng's attack looked like, he would land a great Vajra wheel seal and force Ming Cheng to take a step back. After 9 consecutive great Vajra wheel seals landed, Ming Cheng was forced to the edge of the arena. This caused everyone present to watch anxiously, wondering if Chu Xiu could completely crush and defeat Ming Cheng. Han Tingyi, who was standing on the high platform, nodded. At this moment he could also see that Chu Xiu's strength was truly worthy of his ranking on the Longhu list. Whether it was his own strength or his control of martial arts techniques, he had already reached the peak of the 5 Chi's origin realm. Even warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm were inferior to him in certain aspects. Basic strength, vital energy, and mental strength could be achieved through various external objects. Whether it was through seclusion, the guidance of a great teacher, or the consumption of various treasures, it was very easy to rapidly improve a warrior's realm. On the other hand, combat strength had to be improved through intense fighting, which was the most difficult aspect. Just when everyone, including Han Tingyi, thought that Chu Xiu would still use the great Vajra wheel seal to blast Ming Cheng out of the arena, Chu Xiu's hand seal suddenly changed. This subtle change could not be noticed by others, but as a martial arts master, Han Tingyi immediately felt that something was wrong. However, it was already too late. The 5 rays of light in Chu Xiu's hand were connected from head to tail, rotating endlessly like the great sun wheel. It suddenly fell, and the power of the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, bursting out an unparalleled power. Sun Will Seal. No one present expected that Chu Xiu would suddenly change his hand seal in the middle of the battle. Even his opponent, Ming Cheng, did not expect this. Ming Cheng had taken 9 of Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel seals in a row. He already had a subconscious understanding of the changes in the power of the great Vajra wheel seal, so he only used the martial arts technique that he was good at to resist. He was also prepared to be blasted out of the arena by Chu Xiu's seal, so he did not prepare to use his killing move. However, who would have thought that this time Chu Xiu did not play according to the rules? Under the Sun Wheel seal, Ming Cheng spat out a mouthful of blood, and his internal organs were shaken. He was directly blasted more than 30 meters away, smashed on the ground and fainted. Everyone could see that under this attack Ming Cheng would be seriously injured even if he did not die. Han Tingyi's expression changed and he shouted angrily, "Chu Xiu! What are you doing? Didn't I tell you before that the arena of the World Sword Sect Conference is for you to exchange pointers, not for you to kill?" Chu Xiu shrugged innocently and said, "Senior Han, please understand. There are so many people watching here. I did not kill and Ming Cheng is not dead yet. However, the martial artists of the Great Light Temple are very strong, so I could only use all my strength to attack. Swords have no eyes, fists and feet have no heart. Even if it is a careful sparring, isn't it normal to be injured or something? If there are restrictions, then there is no need to fight. Everyone can just sit down and talk." Han Tingyi snorted coldly. As a martial arts master, he naturally could not be calculative with a junior like Chu Xiu. Although everyone could see that Chu Xiu was quibbling in terms of the rules, Chu Xiu really did not do anything wrong. Han Tingyi rubbed his head with a headache. It did not matter that Chu Xiu had seriously injured Ming Cheng, but the Great Light Temple was in an uproar. Seeing that Ming Cheng had been severely injured, the Great Light Temple's side became even more agitated. That group of disciples were so angry that they seemed to have lost their minds. Immediately, another warrior jumped out and said coldly, "Great Light Temple's Vajra Courtyard's Ming Yi challenges Guanzhong Torture Hall's Chu Xiu." Han Tingyi frowned and said to Chu Xiu, "You have won a round. According to the rules, you can stop for a round to recuperate. Are you going to use it now?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There is no need. I'm not afraid of taking turns." Hearing Chu Xiu say that, Han Tingyi did not say anything else and directly let the two of them fight. Since there was a first round, there would be a second round. He would just let them fight. Ming Yi walked onto the arena. He was slightly older than Ming Cheng, but his attacks were also more fierce. After going onto the arena, Ming Yi did not say anything. He held a Buddhist commandment blade in his hand and slashed at Chu Xiu. His Buddhist commandment blade bloomed with Buddha's light, but the saber's momentum was extremely ruthless. Killing evil and beheading demons, merciful Buddhist commandment blade. With a merciful heart, the saber's murderous intent was limitless. Chu Xiu closed his eyes slightly and the heavenly demon dance was already in his hand. He raised the long saber and the devil's qi and evil blood qi intertwined and condensed, bringing about a wave of extremely evil power. As the saber slashed down, the saber's momentum of the 3 sabers of Avicii condensed into one, and its power was terrifying. The people from the Great Light Temple wanted to find Chu Xiu for revenge, but Chu Xiu was using them to hone his own strength. When he was in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu cultivated the great Vajra divine power and refined half of the fierce beast's heart. His own realm could be considered to have increased greatly, which also caused a slight fluctuation in Chu Xiu's foundation. Although it was only a trace, Chu Xiu still had to hone it to a perfect realm. In such a situation, most warriors usually had 2 methods. One was to continue training in seclusion until they could completely control this power. The other was to hone one's foundation through fighting and killing. Obviously, Chu Xiu chose the latter. Chapter 389. There were no weaklings among the warriors from the Great Light Temple. This was common knowledge in the martial arts world. To put it simply, the Great Light Temple should be a sect with a very low bottom line. As long as it was a warrior from the Great Light Temple, his abilities would not be too weak. The Li family's housekeeper that Chu Xiu had met in Wei County was a cook from the Great Light Temple. He was just a cook, but his abilities were considered outstanding among the rogue cultivators. As for the warriors who came to participate in the World Sword Conference, although they were not at the level of Wisdom King Zhongxian, they were still the elite disciples of the Vajrayard. Otherwise, they would not have been brought by Su Yan to participate in the World Sword Conference. Opponents of this level were not weak. For Chu Xiu they were good materials to train his own strength. At this moment on the arena, Chu Xiu's Avici demonic blade collided with Ming Yi's merciful breaking blade. A monstrous, turbulent demonic aura exploded and directly destroyed the Buddha's light blade. Moreover, this was not the end. Blood-colored astral energy erupted from Chu Xiu's heavenly demonic dance. The boundless killing intent brought about by the refined blood divine astral dance instantly enveloped Ming Yi. The saber aura enveloped him like a torrential downpour. After Ming Yi had slashed through the saber aura with great difficulty, a demonic saber that seemed to have been slashed out from hell, containing divinity, came crashing down. It directly shattered Ming Yi's saber, causing him to vomit blood as he was sent flying off the stage. Chu Xiu used the heavenly demon dance in his hand to point at the people from the Great Light Temple. He revealed a cold smile at the corner of his lips and said, "Next." As soon as he said this, everyone present was in an uproar. To provoke the Great Light Temple like this guy was simply too arrogant. The people from the Great Light Temple were even more in an uproar. A warrior did not even say his name and directly went up the arena to attack Chu Xiu. Everyone present shook their heads. They had seen arrogant people before, but they had never seen someone this arrogant. This Chu Xiu was practically offending the Great Light Temple to death. Could it be that the Guanzhong torture room was so arrogant now that it thought it was the Jianghu's torture chamber? However, they did not know that Chu Xiu dared to be so arrogant because he did not rely on Guanxiu, but rather the entire fiend path behind him. Chu Xiu represented the Yin demon sect or even the entire hidden demon sect. Not to mention Xiahou Jin, Su Yan and the others. Even if the abbot of the Great Brightness Temple Su Ci were to come, there would naturally be those big shots of the demonic Dao who would help Chu Xiu. At this moment in the crowd below, Mr. Liu, who was disguised as the Pine Wave Sword Su Songtao, looked at the extremely arrogant Chu Xiu on the arena and transmitted his voice in a low voice. "This kid is really arrogant. What is he planning to do? Using all the disciples of the Great Light Temple as a whetstone to train his own strength? However, Elder Wei, this kid is not like this usually. When he needs to be low-key, he will be low-key and ruthless. This time he wants to show off in the arena?" Beside Mr. Liu, a handsome young man in white with a jade-like face stood beside Mr. Liu with a folding fan in his hand. With a low and hoarse voice he said, "This kid is smart. He is the new talent of the hidden demon sect. Now that our fiend path has gathered the entire floating jade mountain, it would not be a problem for him to be 100 times more arrogant." The handsome young man standing beside Mr. Liu was Jade Face Heavenly Demon Wei Shuya. He had specially asked the people of the Phaseless Demon sect to help him disguise himself like this. In fact, this appearance was originally Wei Shuya's appearance when he was young. The 9 sky demons of the 5 sky demons were things that happened more than 200 years ago. Now, Wei Shuya was not afraid of being recognized. Although Wei Shuya previously said that his face was full of wrinkles and that he was no longer the Jade Face Heavenly Demon, now that it was time to disguise himself, he took the initiative to ask the people of the Phaseless Demon sect to disguise himself to look young. His words did not match his heart. This almost made the martial artist of the Phaseless Demon sect laugh out loud. Of course, in the end the martial artist held back. Otherwise, this Elder Wei's temper would not be so good. At this time, hearing Wei Shuya say this, Mr. Liu also heaved a sigh of relief. On the surface, Chu Xiu's identity was a rising star of the demon Dao. However, he was also a person that he and Mei Qinglian had their eyes on at the same time. He represented the Yin demon sect and their Phaseless demon sect. In the future, if Chu Xiu became famous in the hidden demon sect, he would naturally be considered as their ally. Therefore, when Chu Xiu stepped onto the arena, Mr. Liu told Wei Shuya about Chu Xiu's identity in the underworld. This was to let this veteran of the demon Dao recognize Chu Xiu as well and gain his favor. Wei Shuya was an experienced person, and he could see through Mr. Liu's thoughts at a glance. He could not help but smile and say, "Don't worry. I said before, this kid is very smart. Moreover, being arrogant is not a bad thing. As a wanderer in the underworld, he should be proud and impassioned. If a person is not arrogant when he is young, he has no future. However, if he is still arrogant when he is middle-aged, then he has no future. When I was young, I was much more arrogant than that kid. My Yinma clan doesn't have to hide in the dark like a mouse and wear out our spirit. It's not bad to be like this kid." A hint of joy appeared in Mr. Liu's eyes. In the Demon Dao, there were not many people that Wei Shuya would say were not bad. It was not easy for Chu Xiu to get such an evaluation. Although this old man was not young anymore, he was still alone and did not even have a disciple or a servant. However, in the Hidden Devil clan he was one of the 5 great sky demons of the 9th Heaven Mountain. This qualification was enough for him to be at the top of the devil path. Moreover, although the Demon Tao alliance created by the 5 sky demons of the 9 heavens mountain was killed, there were many survivors. Those who were able to survive that battle were all strong cultivators in the Demon Tao. Their development in the Demon Tao was not weak. Now that Wuxia had raised his arm and called for help, not all of the disciples of those people were willing to go through fire and water for Wuxia. At that moment, in the arena, Chu Xiu had already consecutively defeated several Great Light Temple's ancient martial art practitioners within a short period of time. Furthermore, it was a battle of attrition. It was a completely crushing aura, directly causing the Great Light Temple's ancient martial art practitioners to be terrified. Not a single one of them could withstand more than 10 moves from Chu Xiu. In the end, although there were still a few people from the Great Light Temple who had not entered the arena, they did not jump out to challenge anymore. Instead, they all lowered their heads and looked angry and humiliated. The remaining few people were weaker than the previous people. Their strongest senior brothers had been defeated. What else could they use to fight? Moreover, because it was a continuous battle, Chu Xiu seemed to have consumed a lot of his inner strength and vital qi. If they persisted, they might have a chance. However, they did not choose to make a move. The reason was simple. The ancient martial art practitioners from the Great Light Temple still cared about their reputation. Since they could not defeat Chu Xiu head-on, even if they could defeat him in a continuous battle, the people of the Jianghu would say that the Great Light Temple was bullying him with numbers. They did not want to do something so embarrassing. Therefore, they could only stand there and not dare to make a move. Looking at the disciples' sullen expressions, Su Du mocked them before Su Yan could say anything. "I say, you juniors are really something. Can't you take a blow? No matter what, Chu Xiu is 6th on the Longhu leaderboard. Do you really think that the leaderboard that Wind-Sweeping Tower created is a joke? If he could be defeated so easily by you, wouldn't the Great Light Temple be able to claim the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard?" Su Du pointed at Su Yan beside him and said, "If you are not convinced, there is still a chance. When you have cultivated to the level of your sect's first seat, you can go and seek revenge on Chu Xiu." Su Yan, who was beside him, nodded. It was not easy for Su Du to say something sensible this time. However, at that moment, Su Du added, "However, your sect's first seat's abilities are not that great. It will be quite difficult for him to seek revenge when he has cultivated to his level." Su Yan immediately glared at Su Du. However, Su Du turned his head to the side as if he did not see it. The Great Light Temple did not dare to make another move after being beaten up by Chu Xiu. Everyone present had seen Chu Xiu's might. Even those who had a grudge against Chu Xiu did not dare to show up at that moment. At that moment, on the other side, there were only 4 people left. They were Fang Qishao, Chu Xiu, Nye Donglu, and Yan Fian. A duel was a very simple matter. However, 7th young Master Fang looked at Yan Fian opposite him. He shrugged his shoulders helplessly and said, "Miss Yan, why don't you just admit defeat? I don't hit women, especially when you are so beautiful and I am so handsome. If the two of us were to fight fiercely here, wouldn't it be a bit of a wet blanket? Why don't you admit defeat and I will treat you to a meal after this? The Yu Maiden Palace is far away in Wuya, so you definitely have not tasted the delicacies of the Western region. When we come to the Western region, I will treat you to roasted lamb legs and lamb chops. Oh yes, there will also be good lamb kidneys. That is a great tonic. Last time I went to a small tribe to rob. I know I borrowed a few holy sheep that were fed with elixirs. Diske, the taste was not ordinary." Everyone present was speechless. This Fang Qishao was really not an ordinary person. Treating Cloud Sword Fairy Yan Fian to eat lamb kidneys? Only Fang Qishao could think of such a showy move. The warrior at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm from Sword King City covered his face in pain. He felt that Sword King City's face had been thrown away by Fang Qishao. If it was not for Fang Qishao's unparalleled talent and swordsmanship, he would have been hung on the city tower as a sacrifice several times by the people of Sword King City. On the opposite side, Yan Fian raised her delicate eyebrows. As an outstanding disciple of the 5 major sword sects, she understood Fang Qishao. She knew that he was such a person, so she did not talk nonsense with Fang Qishao. She raised the Yu Maiden sword in her hand and rushed forward. She knew that she was not a match for Fang Qishao, but as a swordsman she could not take the initiative to admit defeat. The Yu Maiden Palace would not allow her to do so. Chapter 390. Everyone had their own characteristics. Chu Xiu also discovered that Fang Qishao's characteristic was not that he was talkative or amusing, but that he was narcissistic, extremely narcissistic. If one were to evaluate him sincerely, Fang Qishao was definitely not ugly, but he was not handsome either. At least, he was not even close to being handsome. He was just an average person. Not to mention Lu Fengxian's appearance, Chu Xiu dared to confidently say that he was definitely much more handsome than Fang Qishao. But Fang Qishao himself did not think so. He really thought that his handsomeness could make everyone fall for him. But it was very clear that Yan Fian did not really buy Fang Qishao's looks. The Yu maiden sword in her hand was as ethereal as the clouds, and she continuously stabbed towards Fang Qishao. She was beautiful, and her sword's momentum was even more graceful, so beautiful that it was murderous. Of course, Yan Fian also knew that the reason she could fully use her Yu maiden sword technique to attack Fang Qishao was completely because Fang Qishao did not block or counterattack. Fang Qishao's own swordsmanship cultivation could be said to be terrifying, and he was a realm higher than Yan Fian. If he really attacked, Yan Fian might not even be able to block 10 of Fang Qishao's moves. And now Fang Qishao did not draw his sword. He was just casually dodging. While dodging, Fang Qishao looked at Yan Fian and said helplessly, "Miss Yan, I said that I don't hit women. You can't beat me, so what's the point of continuing to fight?" Yan Fian frowned and said, "Fang Qishao, are you insulting me? As a swordsman, if you don't draw your sword when you know you can't win, although it is rational, it is cowardice. Your swordsmanship cultivation is far above mine. Don't you even understand this?" Fang Qishao muttered in a low voice, "Those who know they can't win are idiots." The Sword King City martial artist was about to go mad with anger. He shouted, "Fang Qishao, if you don't act now, don't even think about leaving Sword King City for the next year." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Fang Qishao shook his head helplessly and said, "Boring, really boring." Although he said it was meaningless, Fang Qishao's expression turned serious. The mischievous smile on Fang Qishao's face disappeared completely. The sword that he had been carrying on his back was finally unsheathed. The people of Sword King City were very persistent with their swords. In order to reach the state of being one with the world, most of the disciples of Sword King City kept their swords in their hands even when they were eating or sleeping. They wanted to reach that extreme state of being one with the sword. However, Fang Qishao was an exception. He carried his sword loosely on his back and wrapped it in a piece of linen. It seemed like he didn't care about it at all. This didn't mean that Fang Qishao didn't care about his sword. Instead, Fang Qishao had already reached the state of being one with the sword. The sword was like his fingers and arms. Of course, he would let it go as he pleased. Fang Qishao's sword was a very simple black longsword. It looked like it was cast from black iron. One could see traces of red on its surface. It looked like rust, but at the same time it wasn't rust. When the sword slashed out, it seemed like the brilliance between the heavens and the earth was completely enveloped by Fang Qishao's sword. When the sword came out, there was no sun. An ordinary person would first comprehend the sword's momentum before comprehending the sword's intent. Finally, they would be able to lay out their own sword path. However, 7th young Master Fang was different. He had already comprehended the true essence of the way of the sword at such a young age. When he slashed out with his sword, it already contained 30% of the charm of the way of the sword. The surrounding power of heaven and earth had already been completely absorbed by 7th young Master Fang's sword. In the darkness, the boundless sword aura enveloped Yan Fian. The aura really made Yan Fian feel terror. Fang Qishao said that he didn't want to hit a woman. However, as long as he truly drew his sword, that mischievous and seemingly unruly fellow would become one of the most terrifying swordsmen in the world. Yan Fian frowned. The Yu maiden sword in her hand shone brightly. She had already erupted her power to the extreme. As an outstanding disciple of the younger generation of the 5 major sword sects, Yan Fian and Fang Qishao knew each other. However, they had never officially fought before. This was because she was still young at that time, while Fang Qishao had already become famous at a young age. He was already in the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard. Those who were qualified to compete with him were only elites like Zhang Qingzhen of the Celestial Master Abode and Zhong Xian of the Great Light Temple. Therefore, Yan Fian knew that Fang Qishao was very strong. However, she had never thought that Fang Qishao would be strong to this extent. The Yu maiden sword in Yan Fian's hand was raised. The sword's radiance drew on the power of the heavens and the earth. Although it was slight, it was extremely sharp and indestructible. The cloud sword Daybreak illuminated 1,000 miles. The Yu maiden sword mantra's sword momentum was naturally formed. In Yan Fian's hands it was definitely not weak. However, it was a pity that her opponent was Fang Qishao. Fang Qishao had already comprehended the essence of the sword path. The boundless sword aura pressed down and instantly extinguished the cloud sword Daybreak, causing it to no longer be able to change its radiance. The long sword in Fang Qixiao's hand pressed down. In an instant, the boundless sword momentum absorbed all the surrounding qi of the heavens and the earth. It turned into a sword aura that was dozens of feet long and fell down. It affected half of the ring, and its power could be said to be astonishing. A martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm could only draw and borrow some of the power of the heavens and the earth. However, Fang Qixiao was using his own sword momentum to draw and move the heavens and the earth. The power created was already second only to that of a martial arts grandmaster. The boundless and huge sword aura suddenly smashed down. Yan Fian's figure was pushed back. However, that huge sword aura turned into a sweeping momentum and sealed off all the paths around her, leaving her with nowhere to retreat. The slender Yu Maiden sword in Yan Fian's hand suddenly exploded with a boundless sharp sword aura. As her sword momentum flowed, it turned into a sword aura storm. Under Fang Qixiao's huge sword aura, she bitterly resisted. Her figure retreated step by step. Finally, after she retreated to the edge of the ring, she was finally able to cancel out this sword attack from Fang Qixiao. However, before Yan Fian could heave a sigh of relief, Fang Qixiao once again struck out with his sword. It was a very simple sword attack. The long sword was raised horizontally and stabbed out. It was the same posture that all martial artists learned when they first learned the sword. It was simple and direct. However, it was such a simple stab that seemed to transcend the boundaries of space and time. Under the trajectory of that sword momentum, all the power was sucked out. The distance between Fang Qixiao and Yan Fian was rapidly shrinking. However, Yan Fian did not move. Instead, her eyes revealed a deep sense of shock. When Fang Qixiao stabbed out with his sword, he did not slash a person, nor did he slash heaven and earth but karma. From the moment the sword stabbed out, stabbing Yan Fian was the effect, and the process of the sword was the cause. There must be an effect before there could be a cause. This completely illogical way of the sword was comprehended by Fang Qixiao. No matter what Yan Fian did to resist, she would still lose. Just when Fang Qixiao's sword was less than 10 feet away from her, Yan Fian took a step back and fell off the ring. With a disappointed expression, she said, "I've lost." At the last moment, Yan Fian still retreated because there was no difference between retreating and not retreating. She was destined to be unable to withstand this sword attack. 3 moves. Fang Qixiao only used 3 moves to defeat Yan Fian. They were both in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger roll, but the gap was so big that it was shocking. Everyone present was also silent. The feeling that Fang Qixiao gave people was really too divisive, and they could not react at all. Previously, Fang Qixiao always gave people a feeling of being silly and unreliable. He did not have the slightest aura of a young powerhouse. This also made most people feel that he did not live up to his name. But now that Fang Qixiao became serious and really attacked, everyone finally knew how terrifying Fang Qixiao was. At the same time, they could not help but think, if Fang Qixiao was so terrifying, then how terrifying were Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian, who were ranked first and second on the Dragon and Tiger roll? Could it be that they were comparable to martial Dao grandmasters? After defeating Yan Fian in 3 moves, Fang Qixiao put away the long sword in his hand and returned to his mischievous appearance. He said with a smile, "Miss Yan, I told you to take the initiative to admit defeat. That way everyone can save energy. But don't worry, I, Fang Qixiao, am a man of my word. Just now, I said that I would treat you to a meal, so I will definitely treat you to a meal. When do you have time? Let's meet in the western regions." Yan Fian took a deep look at Fang Qixiao and did not say a word. She turned and left directly. Looking at Yan Fian's back, Fang Qixiao rubbed his chin and muttered, "What does this mean? Did she agree or reject? TSK, women are really difficult to understand. They are even more difficult to understand than Sword Dao." At this moment, on the high platform of floating Jade Mountain, the martial Dao Grandmaster from Sword King City, whose entire body was shrouded in a white robe, said to the others in a proud tone, "Everyone, what do you think of my Sword King City's disciples? Nowadays, the Buddhist sects and Taoist sects dominate the world. In my Sword Dao lineage, only Sword King City's Fang Qixiao can stand shoulder to shoulder with the young disciples of the Buddhist sects and Taoist sects." The beautiful woman from the Yu Nu Palace had an ugly expression. After all, it was someone from the Yu Nu Palace who had lost. Although she also knew that this matter could not be blamed on Yan Fian. It was not that Yan Fian was weak, but that Fang Qixiao was too freakishly strong. A loss was a loss. She could not find any excuses. The villa master of Hidden Sword Villa, Cheng Tingshan, could not help but ridicule, "He was just lucky." It's your Sword King City's luck to have a Sword Dao genius like Fang Qishao. He wasn't nurtured by your Sword King City. The martial Dao Grandmaster from Sword King City stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "That may be the case, but can you protect Fang Qishao if I give him to your hidden sword villa? Only my Sword King City can accommodate Fang Qishao." When he said that, the martial Dao Grandmaster from Sword King City carried a hint of arrogance. In fact, the Sword King City did have a reason to be arrogant. With Fang Qishao's personality and mouth, it could be said that he had offended everyone along the way. His actions were also extremely unreliable. Only the Sword King City had the strength to protect Fang Qishao, allowing him to grow steadily to his current realm. It was true that 90% of Fang Qishao's current cultivation level was due to his own talent, but the remaining 10% was the protection that the Sword King City had given to Fang Qishao. Without this protection, a fallen Sword Dao genius would no longer be a genius but a dead person. Chapter 391. Fang Qishao had defeated Yan Fian of the Yu Palace in 3 moves. This was no longer a one-sided suppression, but a battle between 2 people of different levels. Mr. Liu of the Phaseless Demon Sect had a serious look in his eyes. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the righteous sects, and they were indeed stronger than the diabolism. Mr. Liu himself had already reached the realm of half-step Grandmaster. As long as he was given an opportunity, he was confident that he could immediately step into the realm of martial arts Grandmaster. However, if Mr. Liu were to fight with Fang Qishao now, he was not confident that he could defeat Fang Qishao. On the other hand, on the side of the diabolism, Chu Xiu of the Yinma clan was not bad, but Chu Xiu was only at the realm of 5 Qis collecting in origin, and had not reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man. Mr. Liu did not know if Chu Xiu could defeat Fang Qishao. There was also Yi Tianxia of the Bright Demon clan. He had refined the inner elixir of the Blood Flood Dragon and successfully cultivated the Heart Sutra of the Blood Flood Dragon as a human. He was not easy to deal with, but he had not reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man. The martial artists of diabolism were on the wane. People like Chu Xiu and Yi Tianxia were already considered to be at the top. However, when looking at the righteous sects, especially the Taoist and Buddhist sects, both Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian were outstanding figures that were hard to come by in 1,000 years. Compared to them, the disadvantage of diabolism was really not small. At this time, Wei Shuya, who was standing next to Mr. Liu, seemed to have sensed his thoughts. He transmitted his voice, "Liu Jin, don't be so pessimistic. No orthodoxy can always be strong. The general trend of the world has its ups and downs. Because of the rise of the Kunlun devil cult, our diabolism has been glorious for hundreds of years. Although we are now at a low point, who dares to say that we will always be at a low point? As long as the diabolism is not destroyed, there will always be a chance for us to rise again. Since ancient times, the only orthodoxies that could truly stand at the pinnacle were Taoism, Buddhism, and devil. Now, this bunch of swordsmen want to stir up trouble when they see that our devil Tao is on the decline. They are still far from it." Mr. Liu nodded. Perhaps it was precisely because there were countless people like Wei Shuya in the diabolism that they could continue to survive in this environment where the diabolism was suppressed to the extreme. In the past, Prince Anil had once asked Mr. Liu, "The Kunlun devil cult has been destroyed for hundreds of years. What's the point of persisting in these things?" At that time Mr. Liu did not answer. Perhaps to Mr. Liu and the current Phaseless Demon Sect, their loyalty was not to the Kunlun devil cult, but to the flourishing age of the devil path. At that moment in the arena, the match between Fang Qishao and Yan Fian had ended. Everyone was looking at Chu Xiu and Ye Donglu. The truly interesting match was between these two. Chu Xiu and Ye Donglu could be said to be old rivals and enemies. The grudge between them was recorded on the Longhu leaderboard. It was not something that happened in a day or two. However, Ye Donglu and Chu Xiu never saw each other again. However, the grudge between them had not been put down. Ye Donglu became famous at a young age. He was also a person with great luck. His father, Nye Renlong, had left a strong reputation for him. Just the reputation of the morgue was enough for him to benefit from. After that, Nye Donglu became the disciple of the Northern Yen martial arts tycoon Han Baxian, and received all the teachings of Han Baxian. With the teachings of 2 martial arts masters on the Wind Cloud leaderboard, it could be considered as making up for some of the shortcomings in his own strength. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's experience was even more legendary. From a wandering martial artist to a ruthless killer of the Blue Dragon Society, he then entered the Guanzhong torture room and became the Guanxi penal officer in a short period of time. He held great power in his hands. This kind of resume was enough to look down on the entire Jianghu. So overall, Chu Xiu and Ye Dongliu's growth was completely different. One was the standard elite of an aristocratic family, and had a genius history of growing up with great luck. On the other hand, Chu Xiu had a standard background in the wilderness. With a sword and a saber, he had fought his way through a storm of blood to reach his current realm and achievements. It was hard to say who was stronger between the two, but because of the grudge between Ye Donglu and Chu Xiu, the two would have to fight it out in the end. This also made the people present a little excited, and they were ready to watch a good show. In fact, now that Fang Qishao was fully deserving of the first place, it didn't matter who was second or third. If it were someone else, it might just be a spar and be done with it. But now that it was Chu Xiu and Ye Donglu with the grudge between them, it was obviously not so easy to settle. Ye Donglu looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Brother Chu, you just went through a few big battles. Do you want to rest for a while? Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you." As he said that, Ye Donglu stretched out his hand and pointed, making a magnanimous gesture. The grudge between Chu Xiu and Ye Donglu had long been formed, but in reality he hadn't had many interactions with Ye Donglu. However, regardless of whether it was Chu Xiu or Ye Donglu, they had all heard a lot about each other from others. Chu Xiu's evaluation of Ye Donglu was very simple. He was a scheming person. Even an ordinary sentence from him usually contains several meanings. Just like now, Ye Donglu had asked Chu Xiu to rest on the surface, but under the current situation, could Chu Xiu really rest? Fang Qishao had already smoothly dealt with Yan Fian. Only Chu Xiu was left to fight with Ye Donglu again. There were so many warriors on floating Jade Mountain watching, and there were also martial arts masters from various sects waiting at the side. Could a junior warrior like Chu Xiu really go to the side to rest and recover his vital qi before making a move? There were so many people watching him, Chu Xiu, recover his strength alone? Even if Chu Xiu was thick-skinned enough to ignore the gazes of these people and recover his vital qi, people would still label Chu Xiu as a timid and cautious person. Although it wasn't a derogatory term, it was still not something good. If Chu Xiu couldn't take the provocation and made a move now, it would be in line with Ye Dongliu's intentions. He was a hypocrite, but he was also a real villain. Han Ba first taught him that the easiest way to solve problems was to solve them with one's own fists. His father, Nie Renlong, also taught him that the winner takes all. As long as you can defeat your enemy, using any means is reasonable. Ye Donglu didn't have the confidence to win against Chu Xiu at his peak, but now that he was facing Chu Xiu, who had expended a lot of energy, Ye Donglu still had some confidence. In any case, no matter what Chu Xiu chose, Ye Donglu would be the one to benefit. Looking at Ye Donglu, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Ye Donglu, you're still the same. Although you've become Han Ba's disciple, you haven't learned his domineering ways." Ye Donglu smiled and said, "Domineering ways? I don't need that kind of thing for now. My master walks the path of dominance and I walk the path of the king. Can't I?" Chu Xiu laughed coldly when he heard that. "Ye Donglu, you really are full of yourself. Walk the path of the king? You're just a young master of the Memorial Hall. Do you still think you're a northern Yen prince?" Ye Dongliu's words were indeed arrogant. The Memorial Hall's strength wasn't considered the top among the people and the 6 gangs, yet he still dared to say he wanted to walk the path of the king? Do the nobles and generals have guts? Ye Donglu stood with his hands behind his back and said lightly, "Chu Xiu, you were born in the wilderness and now you don't even have the courage to do so?" Chu Xiu raised the sky demon dance in his hand and pointed it at Ye Donglu. He said in a deep voice, "That's not bad. However, between the two of us, you are the one who looks more like a king. Don't you think that's a little inauspicious?" Nie Renlong was a standard peasant, but Ye Donglu wasn't. The young master of the Memorial Hall was not a peasant, no matter where he was. Of course, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to waste time with Ye Donglu. Since Ye Donglu believed in his so-called way of the king, then Chu Xiu would teach him a lesson. Whether it was the way of the king or the way of dominance, it all had to be carried out with one's fists and the knife in one's hand. Demonic aura gathered on the sky demon dance. The demonic aura was so dense that it had even condensed into the shadow of a demon god on the blade, making people feel abnormally terrified. Seeing this, Han Tingyi and the other people from the 5 major sword sects frowned. It was not because of anything else, but because Chu Xiu's demonic art was too eye-catching. In fact, there was nothing strange about demonic arts. In Jianghu, the martial arts of Taoism, Buddhism, and Diabolism were the most widely spread, especially the martial arts of Diabolism. Although there were flaws such as rapid learning, unstable foundation, and excessive killing, the power of demonic arts was very strong, especially when used as a trump card when fighting for one's life. Therefore, even some righteous martial artists actually secretly practiced demonic arts as a trump card. However, this was the World Sword Sect Conference, and the goal of the 5 major sword sects was to target the demonic arts. Now that Chu Xiu revealed his demonic arts, they couldn't help but be sensitive. If Chu Xiu didn't come from the Guanzhong torture room, had a clean background, and had so many Buddhist techniques, Chu Xiu would have been invited to have tea by now. At this moment, Chu Xiu's devil saber had slashed down, and the fiend god's image that had been condensed from his saber's aura had warped as well. Along with Chu Xiu's saber, a wave of sonic booms resounded. The devil saber that was born from the hell of Avicii had been utilized to its limits by Chu Xiu, and a form of divinity had even appeared when his saber descended. In the face of Chu Xiu's stunning blade, Nie Donglu didn't block it directly. Instead, he retreated first, preparing to use it to hold Chu Xiu back. Chu Xiu's only advantage was his own combat power. However, Chu Xiu's previous battles with the Great Light Temple's martial artists had exhausted nearly half of his inner strength. Nie Donglu didn't believe that Chu Xiu could still control such a powerful explosive power. Therefore, he planned to hold it back until Chu Xiu was truly exhausted. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu's moves were always quick. If Nie Donglu wanted to hold Chu Xiu back, he would have to see if he had enough strength. When Chu Xiu's blade fell, the vital energy defense Nie Donglu set up was like paper in front of Chu Xiu. It was easily torn apart by Chu Xiu's blade. At this moment, Nie Donglu stretched out a hand and pressed it directly on Chu Xiu's long blade. Earth energy exploded, and the demonic flames were instantly extinguished. Memorial Manor's secret technique, Heaven and Earth Cloud Hand. Chapter 392. Although Nie Donglu had a great reputation in the Jianghu, he had not really fought many times. He had always been famous for his scheming, which was why he was ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Now, after years of painstaking cultivation and becoming Han Baxian's disciple, everyone finally saw Nie Donglu's true strength. Heaven and earth above the clouds, grasping the world. The powerful palm power rippled out layer by layer, tearing apart the demonic aura on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance and attacking Chu Xiu along the blade. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Nie Donglu's accumulated strength was not weak, and the gathering loyalty Manor's secret heaven and earth above the clouds hand was really strange. It grasped the universe, and any gang chi power that was caught by the heaven and earth above the clouds hand would be torn apart by the strange ripples. However, in terms of pure strength, Chu Xiu had never been afraid of anyone. The boundless demonic aura on the heavenly demon dance combined with the demonic aura, and Chu Xiu's eyes also turned red in an instant. In an instant, Chu Xiu had already stepped into the state of selflessness. Demonic aura shot up to the sky, and demonic flames swept out. The long blade broke free from Nie Donglu's grasp, and with a surging momentum, it slashed at Nie Donglu. The boundless demonic aura combined with the demonic aura condensed into a hideous shadow of a demon god around Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, it let out a shrill wail of evil spirits. Nie Donglu's figure retreated quickly, and his expression changed slightly. The reason why he had the confidence to fight Chu Xiu was because Chu Xiu had previously gone through the Temple of Great Light's continuous battles against several 5 Chi's origin realm experts who were not weak. He had already expended a large portion of his inner energy. But who would have thought that Chu Xiu would still be able to unleash such a level of power? Just how deep was Chu Xiu's accumulation? Nie Donglu's hands danced in succession. The heaven and earth cloud-reaching hands, which had originally seemed fierce and imposing, now became profound and soft. Yin and Yang, the two extremes of Yin and Yang, the heaven and earth, the two completely different powers fluctuated between Nie Donglu's hands, dividing and canceling out Chu Xiu's violent saber force. However, at this moment, the killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes receded and a mysterious aura appeared around him. The trajectory of Nie Donglu's heaven and earth cloud hand was within Chu Xiu's grasp. Heaven's sun gazing at air. In the past, Chu Xiu could not use the heaven's sun gazing at air in such an intense fight. But recently, although Chu Xiu's cultivation of the heaven's sun gazing at air had not improved, he had become much more familiar with it. Just like now, he could concentrate his mental strength to the extreme in battle and use the heaven's sun gazing at air. The heaven and earth cloud hand, a secret technique passed down in honor manner, was very strange. Could be both hard and soft. Just like just now, it could shatter Chu Xiu's blade power head-on. Now it could split heaven and earth and block Chu Xiu's evil blood blade power. However, in the eyes of Chu Xiu's heaven's son gazing at air, Nie Donglio's next attack trajectory was already clear to him. Chu Xiu's blade power slowed down, but it was no longer continuous like a violent storm. Instead, he stared at the trajectory of Nie Donglio's attack. The moment Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand was about to be used, he blocked his opponent's attack trajectory and completely disrupted his rhythm. After more than 10 strikes, Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand's trajectory had been completely disrupted by Chu Xiu. This made him so frustrated that he almost vomited blood. Every move of his actually seemed to be taking the initiative to collide with Chu Xiu's saber intent. He was completely unable to execute the heaven and earth cloud reaching hands formation. This kind of situation was simply strange to the extreme. It was just like how his father had fed him moves when they were sparring in battle. If one didn't cultivate the heaven and earth cloud reaching hand to the extreme, it was simply impossible to do this. However, Nie Donglu was certain that the Nie family's heaven and earth cloud hand would never be leaked. Tribute Village's heaven and earth cloud hand was created by Nie Renlong based on some ancient techniques he had obtained in the past. In the entire Tribute Village, only he and his father Nie Renlong knew of it, so there was absolutely no possibility of the secret being leaked. Nie Donglu did not know what was going on with Chu Xiu. However, seeing that Chu Xiu's blade power was getting stronger and stronger, and the blade power was getting fiercer and fiercer, constantly approaching him, Nie Donglu snorted. His body suddenly exploded with a blinding golden light, as if the sun had descended upon him. He punched out, illuminating the world. The Northern Yin martial arts tycoon Han Baxin practiced the vast Yang Nine Extremes mysterious skill, which could be considered a half-self-created martial art. In the past, Han Baxin first practiced the body-refining skill that he had exchanged with the Northern Yin imperial court. However, Han Baxin later became obsessed with martial arts and combined the 9 body-refining skills that he had obtained from various places. After they were combined, it became the vast Yang Nine Extremes mysterious skill. The vast Yang Nine Extremes mysterious skill was ferocious and domineering. It was not only a body-refining skill, but also a mysterious skill that accumulated a lot of inner strength. Moreover, Han Baxin had also integrated his own martial arts moves into it, making it even more powerful when used together. Previously, Han Baxin used weapons. He was from the Northern Yin military, so he naturally used heavy weapons. He had used guns, halberd, and even the Green Dragon Crescent blade. However, Han Baxin later discovered that no weapon was as practical as his pair of iron fists. He gave up on weapons and used his fists to fight his enemies. However, he also integrated his use of weapons into the vast Yang Nine Extremes mysterious skill, just like the punch that Nie Donglu threw. The light of the vast Yang Sun shrouded him, but in reality, it was a heavy hammer. It was heavy and powerful with infinite power. The dazzling light collided with Chu Xiu's blade. The light of the vast Yang scorching sun burst out in an instant, eventually tangling with the devil qi and dissipating. Violent gang qi burst out and even the ring shook twice. That was not all. Nie Donglio's figure did not stop at all. He stood straight and threw a punch. It was like a straight spear, bursting forth with unparalleled momentum. Its speed was extremely fast and it was also extremely ferocious. Seeing Nie Donglio's actions, Chu Xiu's lips curled into a cold smile. Did Nie Donglu want to fight in close combat with him? Unfortunately, ever since Chu Xiu cultivated the great Vajra divine powers, he no longer had any weaknesses. Even in close combat, Chu Xiu's accumulated inner force and the physical strength brought by the great Vajra divine powers were no weaker than Nie Donglu, who cultivated the vast Yang Nine Extremes mysterious skill. He sheathed his blade and formed a seal. Among the complicated hand seals, majestic gang qi spread out. The wisdom fist seal useless in heaven and earth. The area within a radius of more than 30 meters became Chu Xiu's gang qi domain. Nie Donglio's punch crashed into the gang qi domain, like a spear piercing into sticky water, its momentum waning again and again. The spear focused on momentum and after piercing out, it moved forward with indomitable will. However, under Chu Xiu's wisdom fist seal, this momentum had already dissipated, and its power was reduced by half. Stepping forward, Chu Xiu formed a complete Aquarius seal in his hand. In an instant, a dazzling light burst out and collided with Nie Donglio's punch, instantly forcing him to take a step back. Stepping forward again, Chu Xiu formed a sunwheel seal in his hand. The 5 elements rotated into one, growing and multiplying endlessly. A powerful gang qi burst out, forcing Nie Donglu to take another step back. Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by golden Buddhist light. One after another, Buddhist mudras landed. Their power was incomparably ferocious. They were actually suppressing Nye Donglu. The power was several times stronger than when Nye Donglu had unleashed the vast Yang Nine Extreme's mysterious skill. Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Nye Donglu was looking for trouble. After all, Chu Xiu had fought several times in the Jianghu, and everyone knew a little about his martial arts. When it came to power, there were few warriors of the same level who could compare with Chu Xiu. Of course, Nye Donglu could only blame his bad luck. He had finally become Han Baxian's disciple and raised his cultivation to the extreme. He did not expect to meet such a monster like Chu Xiu. Even after fighting several battles, he could still burst out with power of this level. Some of the monks from the Great Light Temple below also had ugly expressions, because that was how Chu Xiu had treated them previously. He had unleashed a barrage of attacks without any reason, completely crushing them in terms of power. He had completely overwhelmed them and finally blasted them off the arena. However, Nye Donglu was obviously not one of those monks from the Great Light Temple. After being suppressed by Chu Xiu for several moves, Nye Donglu's eyes revealed a cold look. He had underestimated Chu Xiu this time. After not seeing him for so long, his luck was not bad, but Chu Xiu's growth was even more terrifying. If this continued, he was afraid that before he could exhaust Chu Xiu to death, he would be crushed and defeated by Chu Xiu in public. It was not that Nye Donglu could not accept failure. In fact, he had lost many times in his life. Previously, he lost to a woman, and he was even ridiculed by the warriors of the Northern Yen for a long time. But now, in the World Sword Sect Conference, under the watchful eyes of everyone, if he was crushed and defeated by Chu Xiu like this, it would be a huge blow to Nye Donglu's reputation. So at this moment, Nye Donglu had already made up his mind to fight. Victory or defeat was right in front of him. Although he was full of schemes, he would not hesitate after calculating. Instead, he was extremely decisive. Since he had decided to fight, he no longer worried about being injured or holding back. Before Chu Xiu's fist landed, a blood mist rose around Nye Donglu's body. He had actually burned his blood essence, which made everyone's eyebrows twitch. Burning blood essence, a method that hurt others and oneself, was usually only used when it came to a life-or-death situation. Now that Nye Donglu had even used this method in the ring, it was obvious that he was really angry and had been forced to the extreme. Han Ting, who was the referee on the high platform, wanted to intervene when he saw this scene. However, he resisted the urge. Anyway, it was already the last 2 rounds. If they wanted to fight, then let them fight. Anyway, it did not affect the overall situation. The goal of the 5 major sword sects was diabolism, not to be a mediator between these junior warriors. Chapter 393. Seeing that Nye Donglu was even willing to burn his blood essence, Chu Xiu could not help but frown and take 2 steps back. Nye Donglu's desire to win was not ordinary. It was just a competition in the ring, and Han Tingyi and the others were watching. He could not really kill anyone, so why would he risk his life? Of course, for Chu Xiu he still had the chance to kill someone, but not now but in the future. But now that Nye Donglu had decided to go all out, how could he let Chu Xiu leave so easily? Thick blood essence gathered in Nye Donglu's arms. He pointed out with his fingers, and in an instant 2 blood swords slashed out. But the strangest thing was that the 2 blood swords were wrapped in a thick layer of golden vigor. The 2 blood swords were like 2 dragons, twisting agilely and tearing apart all the vigor around Chu Xiu as they slashed towards him. The 2 blood swords condensed from Nye Donglu's blood essence and vigor were not strange, but they could be said to be magical. Even if Chu Xiu attacked with all his might, he would not be able to completely block them. The vigor was torn apart by the 2 blood swords. Chu Xiu held the Dugu seal in his hand, unmoving like a mountain and invincible. When the 2 blood swords collided with the Dugu seal, blood essence exploded and golden light filled the air, directly shattering Chu Xiu's Dugu seal. Nye Donglu's face was pale, but his speed did not change in the slightest. Just as Chu Xiu's Dugu seal was shattered, he had already closed in. Actually, the 2 blood swords were not taught to him by Han Baxian, nor was it taught by his father, Nye Rinlong. It was an incomplete sword technique that Nye Donglu accidentally obtained. This sword technique originated from the Devil Dao, and the power of the complete version was unimaginable. After Nye Donglu accidentally obtained this sword technique, he gave it to his father, Nye Rinlong. In the end, Nye Rinlong came to the conclusion that the owner of this sword technique should have been from the Kunlun devil cult. It was very likely that he was a devil emissary or even a devil lord of the Kunlun devil cult. However, the damage to the sword technique was too great. Even if Nie Renlong had taken action, he could only extract this move from it. Using one's vital energy and blood as the marrow, essential energy as the bones, and astral energy as the skin, the power of these two swords were extremely powerful. Even Chu Xiu's Duguin would not be able to withstand an attack of this level. Nie Donglu stepped on a golden light, and his entire body was covered in a powerful vigor. When he punched, his aura was raised to the extreme, as if it had the power to shatter a mountain. In the beginning, Nie Donglu had wanted to exhaust Chu Xiu to death. After all, Chu Xiu had already used up a lot of energy. However, in the end, Nie Donglu realized that Chu Xiu had accumulated a terrifying amount of energy. Even after the consecutive battles, Chu Xiu's accumulation was even more profound than his. So, if they continued fighting like this, it would not be Chu Xiu who would be exhausted to death but Nie Donglu himself. So, Nie Donglu could only change his strategy. He attacked with all his strength and unleashed his greatest power to defeat Chu Xiu. Looking at Nie Donglu, who was like a god descending to the world, Chu Xiu's eyes turned red. The Dugu seal had been shattered. Although the power of the two blood swords had been mostly neutralized, there was still a portion of the power that had seeped into Chu Xiu's internal organs, causing his meridians to feel some pain. But at this moment, Chu Xiu had already stepped into the selfless killing realm. Killing intent and baleful aura condensed around him, and things like pain were directly ignored by Chu Xiu. There was only a single word in his mind: kill. As he punched out, the murderous aura around Chu Xiu condensed into a crimson color. It was so red that it shone brightly and was a dazzling red. Forgetting heaven, forgetting earth, forgetting heaven, forgetting killing fist. The punch, condensed to the extreme, collided with Nie Donglu. When the two fists collided, a terrifying wave erupted. The faces of the other cultivators turned pale as well. It was not because of the aura that erupted when the two of them exchanged blows, but because of the terrifying killing intent from Chu Xiu's annihilating heaven and earth extinguishing oblivion killing fist. The forgetting heaven, forgetting killing fist was very famous in the Jianghu. It was not just one or two people who practiced it. Many warriors in the Eastern Qi military had actually practiced this martial art. However, those people were all powerful warriors in the military. It was easy for them to condense this level of killing intent in battle and then use this martial art. But Chu Xiu was different. He was just a Jianghu man and he came from a Jianghu background. Only God knew how he could condense this level of killing intent. If Chu Xiu had not represented the Guanzhong torture room, he would not have felt the slightest bit out of place if someone called him a devil. At that moment, in the arena, Nie Donglio's punch, which could be said to be the pinnacle of power, was blocked by Chu Xiu. This made Nie Donglu gnash his teeth in hatred. Whether or not Chu Xiu's strength was exhausted aside, Nie Donglu himself had expended a lot of energy. Despite going all out, Nie Donglu was unable to shake Chu Xiu, and this was only because he had taken advantage of Chu Xiu's perilous state. Even after Chu Xiu had been taken on in succession, he was still powerless. This made Nie Donglu feel helpless. He finally understood what his master Han Baxian meant. In the face of absolute power, everything else was nothing. Even though he was full of schemes, he still lost in the end. Nie Donglu was not a sore loser. In fact, he was very rational. After feeling that he could not beat Chu Xiu even if he used his last trump card, Nie Donglu immediately prepared to retreat. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu did not want to give him this chance. The moment Nie Donglu retreated, Chu Xiu moved as well. However, Chu Xiu did not move. He formed a seal with his hands and as his fingers tapped, there was an explosion of thunder. Outer Lion Seal. It was like the roar of thunder. Nie Donglu was not prepared at all, and his earth energy dissipated by Chu Xiu's Outer Lion Seal. Blood flowed from his ears. However, the Outer Lion Seal had a limited effect on Nie Donglu. After all, his physical cultivation was still there. After cultivating the vast Yang 9 Extreme's mysterious skill, his physical strength still had a certain degree of defense against martial arts like the Outer Lion Seal. But before Nie Donglu could react, Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned into a bottomless abyss, pulling Nie Donglio's entire mind into it. Extinguishing sky, destroying earth, soul-shifting technique. Secret mental techniques were definitely a minority type in the Jianghu, and those that were related to them were all described as evil and ruthless. Chu Xiu's martial arts had always been firm, fierce, and imposing. Now he had suddenly used a mental secret technique. Not only did Nie Donglu not react, but everyone present also did not react in time. Originally, with Nie Donglio's physical cultivation and strong qi and blood, He still had a certain degree of resistance against secret mental techniques. However, he had used a secret technique to burn his blood essence, causing his blood essence to be depleted. Now he was hit in an instant. His mind fell into a bottomless abyss. Nie Donglu struggled with all his might, and his mental strength was almost stretched to the limit. However, just as he broke free from the influence of the soul-shifting skill, what greeted him was a punch from Chu Xiu. It was the annihilating heaven and earth destroying oblivion-killing fist with infinite murderous intent. Han Tingyi frowned. They could really fight in the ring, but they could not allow anyone to die. So he was already prepared to stop them. However, Nie Donglu still had the strength to fight. At the critical moment, he directly exploded all his Gang Qi, condensing it into a shield in front of him. The golden Gang Qi shield was directly shattered by Chu Xiu's punch, and Nie Donglu was also blasted off the ring by Chu Xiu's punch. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood, but his life was clearly not in danger. Seeing this, Han Tingyi did not continue to attack. Looking at Chu Xiu, who was panting a little but not too injured in the ring, Nie Donglio's heart was filled with unwillingness, but he still wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and returned to his seat. He was not someone who could not afford to lose. At this moment, Nie Donglu also understood that he was still the young master of the Memorial Manor, but Chu Xiu was no longer the Chu Xiu of the past. In the past, Nie Donglio's strength was superior to Chu Xiu's, but now he was crushed by Chu Xiu even though he had resorted to trickery. He had lost completely. At that time, Chu Xiu had no backing. He was just a lone cultivator that Nie Donglu could casually crush to death. Now, Chu Xiu had the support of the Guanzhong torture room and had become the Guanzhong penal officer with great power. Although his status was still not as high as the heir of the Memorial Manor, he was not someone he could casually crush. After all, in terms of power, the Guanzhong torture room was much stronger than the Memorial Manor. Of course, what Nie Donglu did not know was that Chu Xiu had more than just the Guanzhong torture room behind him. The power hidden beneath was something that Nie Donglu did not even dare to think about. Of course, Nie Donglu also regretted not forcing his father to use the power of the Memorial Manor to kill Chu Xiu. However, regret was the most useless emotion. This emotion only flashed in Nie Donglio's heart for a moment before he forcibly extinguished it. No one present was surprised that Chu Xiu had defeated Nie Donglu. On the contrary, to most people this was a very normal thing. To the people of the Jianghu, the reason why Chu Xiu was able to make a name for himself on the Longhu list was because he had fought through many bloody battles. The people of the Jianghu could say that Chu Xiu was vicious, and that he was ruthless. However, no one would say that Chu Xiu did not live up to his reputation and was not worthy of his ranking on the Longhu list. This was a kind of confidence, a confidence obtained from countless bloody battles and slaughters. On the other hand, Nie Donglio's reputation was actually not weaker than Chu Xiu's. In fact, it was even greater than Chu Xiu's. After all, Chu Xiu was only the penal officer of Guangdong, and not the definite successor of the Guanzhong torture room. However, everyone in the Jianghu knew that Nie Donglu was the successor of the Memorial Manor. As long as Nie Donglu did not die, he would definitely take over the Memorial Manor in the future. Therefore, Nie Donglu actually had the halo of the entire Memorial Manor. Without this identity, Nie Donglio's reputation would definitely be far inferior to Chu Xiu's. Now that the two of them were fighting, most people had already expected that the winner would most likely be Chu Xiu. Now that they looked at it, it was just as they had expected. Now that the arena had reached this stage, it was more or less enough. With Fang Qishao's strength and realm, he fully deserved to be number 1. Chu Xiu was number 2, and Nie Donglu was number 3. There was no need to continue fighting. Chu Xiu could also go down and heal his injuries now. Therefore, Han Tingyi just asked a routine question. Chu Xiu, do you still want to fight? Just when everyone thought that Chu Xiu would definitely take the initiative to admit defeat, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Of course I want to fight. Why wouldn't I? I don't have the habit of admitting defeat." Fang Qishao, who was standing at the side, said helplessly, "Brother Chu, you still want to fight when you are already in this state? Don't tell me that you and that woman from the Yunu Palace are also like a fairy. Why are you talking about the dignity of a swordsman? Besides, you are using a saber, not a sword." Chapter 394. Fang Qishao's words made all the saber-wielding martial artists very unhappy. A swordsman needed dignity, but a saber-wielder did not? However, as the matter stood, what Fang Qishao said did make some sense. Now, not to mention that Chu Xiu had overexerted himself, Even if Chu Xiu recovered to his peak, he would still not be able to defeat Fang Qixiao. Since that was the case, what was the point of continuing to pester him? Looking at Fang Qixiao, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Dignity is something that you fight for yourself, not something that you can just talk about. The only reason I want to fight again is because I'm not used to admitting defeat." Seeing that Chu Xiu was so insistent, Fang Qixiao shrugged and said indifferently, "As long as you're happy." Although he was too lazy to make a move, Fang Qixiao felt that it would not take long to finish off Chu Xiu. Based on Chu Xiu's current state, he might be able to finish off Chu Xiu in less than 3 moves. However, although Fang Qixiao was a little unreliable, he was still a kind person. Before he made a move, he specially asked, "Do you need to recover your strength?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No need, this is enough." Fang Qixiao shrugged and said, "All right, I won't stand on ceremony then." As he said that, Fang Qixiao's hand was already on his sword. At the same time, Fang Qixiao's seemingly mischievous expression turned serious. Fang Qixiao was a very split person. His usual state and the state he was in when he held his sword were two different people. Fang Qixiao had seen the power of Chu Xiu's attack just now. He had to admit that Chu Xiu was indeed not weak, but that was all. There was a big realm difference between them and Chu Xiu could not beat him. However, even if Fang Qixiao was confident that he could defeat Chu Xiu, even if Chu Xiu had consumed most of his strength, Fang Qixiao still had to show his serious attitude when facing an opponent like Chu Xiu. If Fang Qixiao was not serious, he would probably lose face in front of Chu Xiu. The seemingly ordinary sword in Fang Qixiao's hand was unsheathed and stabbed out. The karma rotated. His person, his sword, and Chu Xiu seemed to have a strange connection. It was extremely magical. As soon as the fight started, Fang Qixiao used the strongest karma swordsmanship that he could master. He also planned to end the battle with Chu Xiu quickly and then go back to rest. This move was not a sword technique, but had risen to the level of swordsmanship. Therefore, except for martial Dao masters, the people below could not understand it. Although they also felt that Fang Qixiao was somewhat mysterious, it was obvious to them that the current Fang Qixiao was not as powerful as when he fought with Yan Fian, where the sword aura spanned more than 30 meters and swept away everything. At this time, in the face of Fang Qixiao's sword, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a faint excitement. Although Chu Xiu knew that he was no match for Fang Qixiao, he insisted on fighting Fang Qixiao. He did it for the sake of Fang Qixiao's sword. Chu Xiu's mental strength rose to the extreme, and even his eyes became extremely empty. If one looked closely, one could even see the sun, moon, and stars rotating in Chu Xiu's eyes. The heaven's sun gazing at air skill was performed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. Ordinary people only saw the sword that Fang Qixiao stabbed out casually, but what Chu Xiu saw was the powerful karma power. Fang Qixiao's swordsmanship had an effect first, and then there would be a cause. This was a sword that was almost certain to hit its target. Other than forcefully resisting it, no one could break it. Even the grandmasters of swordsmanship in the past had never heard of such a strange swordsmanship. Only God knew how Fang Qixiao had comprehended it. However, Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air skill was the opposite of Fang Qixiao's swordsmanship. What he saw was the cause and what he effected was the effect. Even if it was a sword that was certain to hit its target, Chu Xiu could see the trajectory of the sword, and then he could predict whether to dodge or counterattack. It could be said that what Chu Xiu saw with the heaven's sun gazing at air skill was the future, and it could be considered a type of karma. Therefore, when Fang Qixiao stabbed out with his sword, Chu Xiu suddenly took a step in a direction. It was this step that made Fang Qixiao's body stop abruptly, and a look of horror appeared in his eyes. His karma had been disrupted. He could not stab Chu Xiu with his sword. Ever since Fang Qixiao had successfully comprehended the karma sword principle, even the grandmasters of swordsmanship in Sword King City had been full of praise for him. If they were in his shoes, they would not know how to break it apart from forcefully resisting it. Now, Fang Qixiao did not know whether his karma sword principle had been broken by Chu Xiu or not. In any case, it had been disrupted. If he forcefully attacked again, it would be considered a real failure. Fang Qixiao had a rare look of seriousness on his face. He had thought that he would be able to deal with Chu Xiu with a single sword strike, but he had not expected to encounter such a strange thing. The long sword in his hand changed its trajectory and the karma changed. On the other side, Chu Xiu also took a step forward and changed his karma again. The two of them changed their trajectories back and forth. In the eyes of everyone present, Fang Qixiao and Chu Xiu seemed to be fooling around. One person's sword momentum was slow, and he would stop midway, while the other person was simply walking around in the arena. However, they did not know that Chu Xiu and Fang Qixiao's mental strength had been stretched to the extreme. The change in karma was a competition of their understanding of their own martial path and the strength of their mental strength. Chu Xiu had insisted on attacking Fang Qishao for this scene. From the moment Fang Qishao had used the karma sword principle to defeat Yan Fian, Chu Xiu had already had a plan. His heaven's sun gazing at air skill was extremely difficult to cultivate, and he could not even make progress in closed-door training. He could only hone it through killing. However, even so, the progress of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill was very slow. That was until Chu Xiu saw Fang Qishao's karma sword principle, which was actually somewhat similar to the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. They were both related to karma, so Chu Xiu wanted to use Fang Qishao's karma sword principle to hone his own power. As it turned out, Chu Xiu was right. Every time Fang Qishao changed the trajectory of his sword, Chu Xiu had to exert all his mental strength to perform the heaven's sun gazing at air skill. Under such pressure, although his mental strength was stretched to the extreme, the cultivation of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill improved visibly under the pressure. At this moment, the other martial Dao masters present revealed a hint of shock in their eyes. They had long known that Fang Qishao was talented, so they were not surprised that Fang Qishao displayed such a cultivation level. Now that Chu Xiu was also good at martial arts related to karma, he could even fight Fang Qishao to such a stalemate. Although they knew that the current Chu Xiu was definitely not Fang Qishao's match, it was clear that Chu Xiu had the potential to catch up to Fang Qishao's level. On the high platform, Qing Tingshan from the Hidden Sword Villa said sourly, "Guanzhong torture room is really lucky. There are almost many talents in the past few generations. First there was Chu Kuangsong that shook the Jianghu, and then there was Guan Xiu who turned the tide. This generation has Chu Xiu. This Guanzhong torture hall is really lucky." Among the 5 major sword sects, only the Hidden Sword Villa and the Yu Palace had weak potential. The Yu Palace was weak because they only accepted female disciples, and the Jianghu was dominated by men. Therefore, it could be said that the Yu Palace excluded 80% of the Jianghu people. Moreover, the Yu Swordplay Codex itself was also an unstable factor. As for the Hidden Sword Villa, the reason was even simpler. Although there were outsiders in the Hidden Sword Villa, the Cheng clan had always been in charge of the villa. It was almost like an aristocratic family. As a result, the Hidden Sword Villa's secret techniques, as well as some of their treasured swords, could only be used by the Cheng family. Even if outsiders were powerful, the Cheng family would not be at ease to hand over the techniques and weapons to them. The Sword King City's martial Dao master suppressed his surprise and said indifferently, "So what if he's lucky? Potential doesn't equal strength." Fang Qishao won this round, and Fang Qishao will continue to win in the future. Although Chu Xiu has potential, he can't threaten Fang Qishao of Sword King City. Qing Tingshan sneered and did not say anything. Although he did not like Sword King City, he would not say anything under such circumstances. After all, Fang Qishao was a member of the 5 major sword sects, while Chu Xiu was a member of Guanzhong Torture Room. Even if the 5 major sword sects had conflicts with each other, they still had to unite against outsiders. At this time, Fang Qishao had changed his sword 9 times in a row, but he did not manage to stab all 9 times before Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air saw through him. In the end, Fang Qishao had no choice but to withdraw his sword. At this time, Chu Xiu's mental energy was almost at its limit. When he saw that Fang Qishao still wanted to change his sword stance, Chu Xiu said directly, "There's no need to fight. I admit defeat." Everyone present was stunned. That's it? The two of them took a few steps forward inexplicably, and Chu Xiu admitted defeat without even making a move? Didn't you say that you're not used to admitting defeat? Why do you say it so skillfully now? But no matter what, the warriors below the stage were all dumbfounded, completely unable to make heads or tails of what was going on. Fang Qishao put the long sword in his hand back on his back and glared at Chu Xiu fiercely. "So you're using me as your whetstone. I even wanted to treat you to a meal. Now you should be the one treating me." Although Fang Qishao was a little unruly, he was not an idiot. On the contrary, Fang Qishao was very smart. When they were fighting just now, he was focused on the sword principle, so he did not notice it. It was only when Chu Xiu admitted defeat while sweating profusely that Fang Qishao realized that although he had won this round, he had been tricked by Chu Xiu and helped him hone his martial arts. Winning or losing didn't matter to Chu Xiu from the beginning. Therefore he was ungrateful and insisted on fighting with Fang Qishao. He wanted to use Fang Qishao to hone his heaven's sun gazing at air cultivation. Hearing this, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's not a problem to have a meal together, but I'm guessing that your seniors in Sword King City don't want us to be together. Moreover, It's also a problem if you can come out after returning to Sword King City. That fellow who I don't know if he's your senior brother or martial uncle will definitely report you. Chapter 395. In the battle with Fang Qishao, Chu Xiu seemed to have lost, but in fact he had gained something. The heaven's sun gazing at air could only have an obvious breakthrough under this kind of pressure. If Fang Qishao was willing to be Chu Xiu's sparring partner, Chu Xiu was even confident that he could cultivate the heaven's sun gazing at air to a proficient level in a short period of time. But obviously this was not going to happen. Now Fang Qishao was already very unhappy. Although he had won in the end, he felt like he had suffered a loss. After the younger generation's arena competition was over, the prizes were not distributed on the spot. Instead, they were going to be distributed to everyone after the World Sword Sect Conference ended. Next, it was time for the martial Dao masters to spar with each other. Everyone was excited about it. After all, for most of the warriors present, it was very difficult for them to see martial arts grandmaster-level experts fight. Even if they could not understand it, as long as they saw it, it would be enough for them to brag for a long time. Han Tingyi and the other people from the 5 major sword sects looked at each other. They walked down the high platform at the same time and stood in the arena. Everyone present instantly started discussing in low voices when they saw these people. These people were all renowned grandmasters of the sword Dao from the 5 major sword sections. The beautiful woman in palace attire from the Yu Palace was the current palace master of the Yu Palace, Moon Shadow Star Mark Lin Fengya. Although she was not famous in the martial arts world, she was not small either. Of course, her fame was mostly because of her identity as the palace master of the Yu Palace. Lin Fengya was ranked 25th on the honor list. Her ranking was even higher than Han Tingyi in the Sword Hut. But in reality, the people of the martial arts world also knew that Lin Fengya's ranking on the honor list was actually somewhat high. With her strength, it was difficult for her to even enter the top 30. Now she was ranked 25th because of her identity as the palace master of the Yu Palace. More importantly, it was because she was one of the few women on the honor list that her ranking was so high. The martial artist with 7 swords on his back was the master of the Hidden Sword Villa, Heartless Sword Tomb, Qing Tingshan. He originally carried 10 swords, but the other 3 had been broken. He had broken 3 swords and killed 3 people. Of the 3 people who had died, one was a murderer who had become sworn enemies with the Hidden Sword Villa in the past, while the other 2 were powerful figures of the demonic Dao. Qing Tingshan's strength was not weak among the martial Dao masters. However, the Hidden Sword Villa had been on the decline recently, and Qing Tingshan was not a woman, so naturally, he did not receive any preferential treatment. Therefore he was only ranked 33rd on the honor roll, not even in the top 30. The white-robed warrior from Sword King City was the first seat of Sword King City's Xingjian Hall, Formless Sword, by Qian. He was ranked 30th on the Wind Cloud list, second only to Han Tingyi of the Sword Hut. Among the 4 major sword halls of Sword King City, the Xingjian Hall specialized in sword techniques. However, Bai Qian had already transformed his sword techniques into a realm wherein corporeal triumphed over corporeal, so his nickname was Formless Sword. From this, one could see Bai Qian's terrifying cultivation in the way of the sword. The last person was the white-robed, barefooted young man with a broken sword mark on his forehead from the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. In fact, among the 5 martial Dao masters, he had the most powerful background. The Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was a place where swords were hidden. Legend had it that in ancient times, when some sword Dao masters were on the verge of death, they would bury their swords in a place. That place was the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb according to the customs of the Jianghu. The swords of the sword Dao masters were definitely extremely precious weapons or even divine weapons. Therefore, the disciples or servants of the sword Dao masters would spontaneously build huts around the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb to protect the divine weapons and treasured swords in the tomb. Later on, as the number of people guarding the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb increased, their descendants also multiplied, and they joined together to form a sword Dao sect. It could be said that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was the inheritance of countless sword Dao masters in the past. It could be said that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was the strongest among the 5 major sword sects. Moreover, even if the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb's experts of a certain generation withered, no one dared to provoke it, because no one knew what kind of mysterious or evil existence Wind Cloud Sword Tomb would invite from the place where swords were hidden. Legend had it that the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb suffered a blow more than 2,000 years ago. The entire Wind Cloud Sword Tomb was left with an old martial Dao master. Therefore, an enemy sect came to the Wind Cloud Sword Tomb. The enemy had 6 martial Dao masters, and the sect's experts gathered, wanting to completely destroy the Wind Cloud Sword tomb. In the end, the old martial Dao master used his own blood as a sacrifice to invite a sword spirit that was formed from the Wind Cloud Sword tomb's countless killing intents. It actually slaughtered the 6 martial Dao masters. Although the martial Dao master of the Wind Cloud Sword tomb exhausted his blood and passed away in less than 3 days, it also let the entire underworld know that the Wind Cloud Sword tomb was not to be trifled with. Even if there was only one person left, no one knew what other trump cards he had. The white-clothed barefooted young man had a very mysterious origin. Legend had it that outsiders couldn't enter the Wind Cloud Sword tomb's land of buried swords. To be precise, only warriors with chi could enter. As long as they approached, they would trigger the formation. Because the land of buried swords was connected to a barren forest, a wild wolf entered the land of buried swords with a baby boy in its mouth. It threw the baby boy next to a broken sword and fed him with wolf milk every day. The baby boy didn't cry or make a fuss. He was only discovered by the people of the Wind Cloud Sword tomb when he was 3 years old. For a time, the entire Wind Cloud Sword tomb was shaken. For some reason, the baby boy seemed to have formed a strange connection with the broken sword beside him. The broken sword spirit had dissipated, and a new spirit was born, turning it into a new god weapon. Later, the baby was raised by the Wind Cloud Sword tomb and accepted as a disciple. Even the deceased previous leader of the Wind Cloud Sword tomb, the old sword god Guillemot, took him as a disciple and taught him swordsmanship. Because he didn't have parents and didn't even know what his surname was, Guillemot named him Yanji because the broken sword that accompanied him was called Yanji. Yanji also became the most special existence in the Wind Cloud Sword tomb. He was born with a god weapon, and that god weapon was connected to his flesh and blood. When he cultivated to the unity of heaven and man realm, the god weapon could fuse with his body. No matter how long he lived, he could guarantee that he wouldn't age. It was very miraculous. Yanji was ranked 23rd on the Wind Cloud Sword tomb, but everyone in the underworld said that Yanji's ranking was definitely higher than that. He didn't fight many times, but every time he did, he would easily defeat his opponents. Under the broken sword, there was no one who survived. Among the 5 people present, Yanji could be said to be the strongest and the most unfathomable. If there were no accidents, the champion of this arena competition should be Yanji. However, although the 5 of them were going to compete on the arena, those who were familiar with the inside story knew that they were just putting on a show for the Devil Dao. The Good Fortune Heavenly Demon flag didn't have much meaning to the 5 great sword sects. They wouldn't fight to the death for this thing. The only goal of the 5 of them going on the arena was to lure the Devil Dao to attack. Han Tingyi said to everyone present in a deep voice, "Everyone, the second round has begun. I will first show my incompetence. Our 5 great sword sects will exchange pointers with each other, so we won't waste time with one-on-one games. The 5 of us will fight together to determine the winner." As he spoke, Han Tingyi and the other 4 began to fight, immediately attracting the attention of everyone present. It was indeed rare to see 5 sword masters fight, but Chu Xiu only took a few glances before losing interest. These people were really acting. They weren't paying attention at all. Although the 5 of them fought with sword chi and astral energy, in reality the 5 of them didn't even use 10% of their power. Han Tingyi didn't use the powerful sword intent of the sword hut at all. Qing Tingshan only used one of his 7 swords, and he didn't use the white submerged invisible sword either. Instead he used many sword moves that looked gorgeous but were just for show. Lin Fengya was the same. She didn't use the natural power of the Yu Maiden swordplay. It wasn't even as good as Yan Fian's previous attack. The one who was the most outrageous was Yanji. Everyone wanted to see how he would fuse the Yanji sword into his body. In the end he did not even draw his sword. He condensed his true chi and used his sword fingers to attack. It was really outrageous. Of course, for the wandering martial artists, Han Tingyi and the others were already fighting fiercely enough. They enjoyed watching. After about 2 hours of chaotic fighting, the 5 of them finally decided the winner. The final winner was actually Qing Tingshan of the Hidden Sword Villa. Seeing this result, everyone present curled their lips. They really didn't pay attention. How could such a result come out? However, the people from the 5 major sword sects didn't care about the discussions below. Han Tingyi cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, the outcome of our 5 major sword sects spar has been decided. Villa Master Qing of the Hidden Sword Villa has deep attainments in the way of the sword and is ahead of us. Is there anyone else who wants to come up and spar? The winner can take away the demonic creation flag." The martial arts masters below all raised their eyebrows, but no one said a word. They all knew that this time the people from the 5 major sword sects wanted to lure out the people from the demonic path. They didn't object to this, but they also couldn't be bothered to get involved. So naturally no one spoke at this time. However, at this time, a hoarse old voice came from below. Can your 5 major sword sects act any more fake? This kid from the hidden sword villa has no attainments in the way of the sword. He carries so many swords all day like a peacock spreading its tail. Doesn't he know that the more cocky a person is, the faster they die? Who is 10 Directions Divine Sword, Qing Nanbei to you? Is he your grandfather or your great-grandfather? That old guy also likes to carry 10 swords on his back and run around in the pugilistic world. In the end, I broke his neck and broke 9 of his swords. The remaining one looked good, so I made it into a door bolt. It's still hanging on the door of my cottage. Chapter 396. As the hoarse, old voice rang out, a young man in white with a jade-like face walked out from the crowd, gently fanning himself with a folding fan. However, his steps did not seem like that of a young man, but more like that of an old man. Han Tingyi and the others immediately became serious. He was finally here. However, Qing Tingshan's expression was ugly because this man was insulting their hidden sword mountain villa. Qing Nanbei was not his grandfather, nor was he his great-grandfather. Instead, he was an ancestor of the hidden sword mountain villa's Cheng clan. He was someone of the same generation as his great-grandfather, but he was killed by the demonic Dao in his early years. However, that was more than 200 years ago and Qing Tingshan was only in his 50s. At that time, even his father hadn't been born yet. Qing Tingshan had only occasionally seen a description of it in the family tree. How could he remember it so clearly? However, this man in front of him said that he was the one who killed his ancestor. Didn't that mean that this man had lived for at least 200 years? Who was this man? Qing Tingshan thought about it and suddenly thought of something. He suddenly shouted in shock, "Jade-face heavenly demon! You're Jade-face heavenly demon Wei Shuya. You're not dead yet." As soon as this was said, the crowd immediately went into an uproar. Although more than 200 years had passed, the reputation of the 9 Mountains' 5 great demons was still very famous. Wei Shuya twisted his neck. His appearance changed from that of a handsome young man to that of an old man with a face full of wrinkles. "Tsk tisk, it's not easy. I didn't expect someone to still remember me. It seems that your hidden sword mountain villa still holds a grudge. Could it be that you've been thinking about how to kill me all these years?" Han Tingyi and the others all frowned. It seemed that they had really provoked the demonic Dao this time. Even an old demonic Dao monster like Wei Shuya had come out. On the other side, Qing Tingshan's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. He said, "The people of my hidden sword mountain villa will not die in vain. All these years, my hidden sword mountain villa did not make a move because we thought you were dead. I didn't expect you to still be alive. However, it's a pity that you could have continued to live for a while. In the end, you voluntarily jumped out to die. You can't blame me for this." As soon as he finished speaking, the 5 long swords behind Qing Tingshan were unsheathed at the same time. Violent earth energy gathered on the swords, forming a sword formation that enveloped Wei Shuya. At the same time, Qing Tingshan held a long sword in each of his hands. He used 2 sword techniques at the same time and attacked Wei Shuya. In the past, the 9 Mountains' 5 great sky fiends were indeed famous. Even the hidden sword villa's ancestor had died at Wei Shuya's hands. However, when Qing Tingshan faced Wei Shuya, he was still confident that he could defeat him. The reason was simple. Wei Shuya was old. In the Jianghu, it was not the case that the older one was, the stronger one would be. If that was the case, then everyone should stop fighting and find a place to go into seclusion. Let's see who lived the longest and who would be the king of the Jianghu. No matter how arrogant you were in the pugilistic world, you couldn't resist the ravages of time. Qing Tingshan was only in his 50s at the moment. For a martial Dao master, he was in the prime of his life, when his qi and blood were at their strongest. What about Wei Shuya? He was already old, completely old. In fact, even if Wei Shuya didn't attack him after a while, he would probably die of old age. There was no need for Qing Tingshan to be afraid of such an old thing with declining qi and blood. However, before his sword formation could land, he saw Wei Shuya yawn lightly. However, this yawn was like a demonic sound piercing through the ears. A huge sound wave suddenly erupted, taking away one's soul. Almost in the blink of an eye, the sword formation that Qing Tingshan had set up was completely destroyed. Qing Tingshan's eyes revealed a look of horror. This old thing was already more than 200 years old. How could he still be so powerful? However, before he could react, he saw Wuxia stretch out a hand and suddenly press down. In an instant, the surrounding qi of heaven and earth all turned into monstrous demonic qi, condensing into a giant hand that was hundreds of feet long. It was like a mountain with 5 fingers crushing down on Qing Tingshan. Demonic devouring myriad worlds, sky-covering palm. Before the palm energy landed, Qing Tingshan had already spat out a mouthful of blood from the terrifying pressure. A few days ago at the Bone Tree Villa, Wuxia had also attacked Mountain Ghost. However, Mountain Ghost was a member of the moon-worshipping cult after all. The bright demons and the hidden demons were still preparing to join forces. Of course they would not fall out with each other. Therefore Wuxia still held back when he attacked. He only taught Mountain Ghost a little and did not go all out. However, it was different against Qing Tingshan now. Wuxia was going to kill him. At that moment, Qing Tingshan looked at the giant demonic qi hand in shock and said hoarsely, "True fire spirit refinement. You actually broke through to the true fire spirit refinement." It was not easy to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, but breaking through to the true fire spirit refinement was even more difficult. Back when Wuxia was still at his peak, he had not even reached the true fire spirit refinement. Now that Wuxia was old and had basically no chance of advancing further, how did he reach his current realm? However, there was no time for Qing Tingshan to think at this moment. If the palm landed, he would probably be seriously injured even if he did not die. At that moment, Han Tingyi and the others who were standing behind Qing Tingshan also came to his rescue in time. After all, they were all standing on the same side. Han Tingyi unsheathed the long sword in his hand with one hand. The seemingly ordinary redwood scabbard hid a dazzling long sword, the vacant sword. As Han Tingyi unsheathed the vacant sword in his hand, all the power in the world condensed into sword momentum and met Wuxia's palm. At that moment he slashed out with his sword, which was also the world. The white-clothed, barefooted Yanji extended his index finger and pointed it between his eyebrows. The golden broken sword mark shone brightly and a golden broken sword materialized from illusion and emerged from within Yanji's body. As he pointed his finger forward, the broken sword whizzed towards the demonic palm in mid-air. However, the golden broken sword was surrounded by a terrifyingly powerful sword aura. It extended for dozens of feet and its power was incomparably great. A loud noise was heard and Han Tingyi and the other two took a step back. The 3 of them worked together and barely managed to block Wuxia's palm. One could imagine how terrifying Wuxia was at that moment. Looking at those people, Wuxia's old face revealed a cold expression. The juniors are useless. They can't even withstand a single blow. To the others present, Han Tingyi and the others were seniors in the pugilistic world and unattainable martial Dao masters. However, to an old antique like Wuxia they were genuine juniors. After all, when he was dominating the pugilistic world, these people were not even born yet. However, at that moment, a majestic voice suddenly sounded. "Wuxia, you said that they can't withstand a single blow. How about I do it now? I heard that you have the best relationship with the Crimson Blood Demon among the 5 Skyfiends of Ninth Sky Mountain. I didn't believe it at first. When I destroyed Ninth Sky Mountain I wanted to kill you. However, the Crimson Blood Demon risked his life to stop me. He didn't retreat even after I killed 9 of his blood goo avatars. In the end, I shattered his heart meridian with my sword and bought you time to escape. Otherwise, do you think you would still be alive today? Do you think you can show off your power in front of the 5 major sword sects? The Crimson Blood Demon used his life to buy you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it. What? Have you finally lived enough?" As the voice faded, an old man in a golden python robe walked down from the high platform. He had a long sword hanging from his waist, which was as red as fire. What was shocking was that his feet were completely suspended in the air, as if there were invisible steps below him. This move was called the Sky Suspension Ladder. In fact, most warriors at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm could do it. They used their spiritual chi to temporarily support their body, which would create such a mysterious effect. However, this old man was different. No one could sense a trace of spiritual chi fluctuations from his body. Every time he took a step, the power of heaven and earth automatically flowed into his feet, providing him with support. It was simply terrifying. All the cultivators below were dumbfounded. Who was this person? However, from the tone of this person, it was obvious that he was an older expert from the same generation as Wuxia. He had participated in the battle to kill the 5 sky demons of the 9 Heavens Mountain and had even killed a sky demon. Among the young warriors present, they naturally paid attention to the Longhu list. They had naturally heard of the Fengyan list, but they really didn't know much about these things that happened hundreds of years ago. However, grandmasters like Xiahou Zhen were very familiar with the matters of the Jianghu. Almost instantly they guessed the identity of this old man. They said in shock, "It's the king of Jianan, Du Guli." Du Guli's nickname was the king of Jianan. This king was not an honorific title like Sword Venerable or Sword Saint. He was indeed a king in the past. 200 years ago, other than the northern Yin, western Chu and eastern Qi, there were some small countries such as the Wei Kingdom, which was the predecessor of the Wei County. Du Guli was a king in the state of Liang. He was even the elder brother of the emperor of the state of Liang. Back then Du Guli was actually the crown prince of the state of Liang. However, he was obsessed with swordsmanship. He gave up the position of crown prince to his younger brother and became an idle king to practice swordsmanship. He even traveled the Jianghu to seek advice from swordsmanship experts. Later on, Du Guli joined the Sword King city to practice swordsmanship in seclusion. He was once the first seat of the Sword King city's combat sword hall. Later on he became an elder of the Sword King city. However, after the state of Liang was destroyed by the northern Yin, Du Guli became a loner. He even went to the northern Yin royal family to seek revenge. He single-handedly slaughtered the northern Yin army, one of the 5 armies of the state of northern Yin. He killed several generals of the northern Yin army. In the end, he was seriously injured by an expert of the northern Yin army and fled. Du Guli was quite famous 200 years ago. One could even say that he was a fanatic. If it was anyone else, even if their own country was destroyed by the northern Yin, they wouldn't have the guts to challenge the northern Yin dynasty. Even if the entire Sword King city came, it would be useless. However, Du Guli dared to single-handedly kill his way to the northern Yin kingdom to seek revenge. Not many people had this kind of courage. Chapter 397. The 5 great sword sects had planned for a long time for today's battle. They were not afraid of the people from the demonic path coming. They were only afraid that the demonic path would not come. Thus, the 5 great sword sects had brought out their true trump cards. There was more than one person like Du Guli. Following Du Guli's appearance, 2 more figures descended from the sky. One of them was dressed in a green Confucian robe. He had the appearance of a refined and handsome middle-aged man. A bamboo flute hung from his left waist and a green short sword hung from his right. His every movement seemed to blend into the surroundings and gave off a very strange feeling of nature. Seeing this person, everyone present did not need to guess. This person was the leader of the Forgetful Sword Hut, the Xiaoxiang Sword Range Shin Baochen, who was ranked 5th on the Wind and Cloud list. He was also a genius who had stunned the Jianghu. Legend had it that Shin Baochen started learning the sword at the age of 10. Every time he reached a new realm, he would challenge warriors 1 realm higher than him. Before reaching the Unity of Heaven realm, Shin Baochen had challenged warriors from the Forgetful Sword Hut. After reaching the Unity of Heaven realm, Shin Baochen had actually challenged a famous grandmaster of the sword in the Jianghu. He had crossed a large realm and defeated him. He had even made the grandmaster break his own sword and admit that he was not as good as Shin Baochen. It could be said that ever since Shin Baochen had stepped into the Jianghu, he had only done 2 things: cultivate and challenge. Shin Baochen rarely fought, but when he did, he would not lose. Those who had been defeated by Shin Baochen had said that Shin Baochen's sword was a sword that made people despair. Compared to Shin Baochen, the other person was someone that the people present could not see through. It was an unkempt old man. He wore a gray robe and the original color could not be seen. His hair and beard were also white and messy. His figure was bent and one of his eyes seemed to be blind. He only held a dirty long sword in his hand. His original appearance could not be seen. In other places, no one would even look at such an old man. But here, this old man did not seem out of place when he stood next to Du Guli and Shin Baochen. His aura was as terrifying as an abyss. This time, even Xiahou Zhen, a martial Dao Grand Master, could not recognize him. However, Shudu, who had always been lazy, suddenly said, "This old man is an old man guarding the Storm Sword Tomb. It doesn't matter what his name is. Anyway, in this generation there is only one heir, and they have been guarding the sword vault for generations, never leaving it even an inch. The last time he left Windcloud Sword Mound, it was because the demonic path's overlord, Demon Lord Nine In Zhaoyang, that old lunatic's actions were too crazy. He killed people without restraint in the martial world, and even a few elites from the Great Light Temple and Windcloud Sword Mound died in his hands. At that time, senior brother Su Yun went with this old fellow. Senior brother Su Yun told us that he didn't make a move. Only this old fellow made a move. After that, Yin Zhaoyang died without a complete corpse. Hearing this, everyone present gasped. The way they looked at the sloppy old man instantly changed. They had never heard of the Storm Sword Mound's tomb keeper, but they knew about Demon Lord 9 Yin Zhaoyang. He was a demonic path overlord from 100 years ago. He had the cultivation of spiritual cultivation with true fire, and he had once dominated the martial world. However, in his later years, there seemed to be some problems with the martial arts he cultivated, and there was something wrong with his brain. He crazily slaughtered the elites of the martial world and used their heart blood to refine medicine in order to extend his lifespan. It was extremely difficult to extend one's lifespan. Using the so-called heart blood to extend one's lifespan sounded unreliable, but at that time Yin Zhaoyang had completely gone crazy and caused quite a stir in the martial world. However, no one knew when Yin Zhaoyang had suddenly disappeared without a trace. It was only now that everyone knew that Yin Zhaoyang had died in the hands of this unremarkable old man. In that case, didn't this person have already reached spiritual cultivation with true fire 100 years ago? The way everyone looked at the 5 major sword sects changed slightly. The 5 major sword sects were really going to play it big this time. Jianan King Dugali, the sect master of the Forgetful Sword Hut, Shin Baochen, and the Storm Sword Mound's tomb keeper were all experts among experts at spiritual cultivation with true fire. The demonic path was probably going to be in trouble this time. However, before anyone could react, Wei Shuya said coldly, "Don't hold it in anymore. Show yourself when you're ready." Wei Shuya's voice did not sound loud, but it seemed to spread throughout the entire floating Jade Mountain. As Wei Shuya's voice fell, a series of battle cries came from the foot of floating Jade Mountain. Demonic chi and murderous intent surged, instantly surrounding the entire floating Jade Mountain. Dozens of disciples in charge of guarding the gate at the foot of the mountain ran up in a panic. As they ran, they shouted, "This is bad. The demonic path has surrounded the entire floating Jade Mountain." As the warrior's voice fell, countless demonic path warriors surged up from all directions. These people were from the moon-worshipping sect, the evil Zenith sect, the Five Venoms sect, and the other sections. They were all warriors from the bright demon lineage. Among these warriors, the moon-worshipping sect had the most people. After all, in the eyes of most demonic path warriors, the moon-worshipping sect represented the number 1 sect of the demonic path. Among the group of people from the moon-worshipping sect, a man shrouded in a black robe stepped through the air. He stepped through the crowd and stood beside Wei Shuya. This mysterious black-robed man wore a golden jade dragon crown on his head. His black robe was also embroidered with strange golden runes. He stood with his hands behind his back, and an ancient and desolate aura emanated from him. It's the East Monarch Tai of the moon-worshipping sect's 9 great god magi. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. This person was definitely one of the top 3 figures in the moon-worshipping sect. The ranking of the moon-worshipping sect had always been based on the sect leader, the high priest, and the saintess. The 9 great divine Magisprius could only be ranked behind them. However, this generation's saintess was still young and had yet to mature. Eastern Emperor Tai's strength could be said to be amazing. He was even able to compete with the high priest in the moon-worshipping sect. Therefore, his status was probably the highest among all the Eastern Emperor Tais in history. At this time, on the moon-worshipping sect's side, a woman shrouded in a black veil was dancing. Her figure was graceful and exquisite. Although her face was also covered by a black veil, it could not hide her extremely charming charm. However, although her dance was beautiful, the things under her feet made people's scalps go numb. They were densely packed and countless goo insects danced to her rhythm. Moon-worshipping sect's saintess. Everyone present almost instantly recognized this woman's identity. Among the 4 great beauties of the martial arts world, the righteous path had Yen Fian, the cloud sword fairy of the Yu Palace, while the demonic path had moon-worshipping sect's saintess as the most famous. But the strange thing was that the people of the martial arts world had never seen what this saintess looked like. They did not even know how old she was because those who had seen her true appearance were all dead people. But even so, the people of the martial arts world were sure that the appearance of moon-worshipping sect's saintess must be extremely beautiful. The reason was very simple. The moon-worshipping sect's saintess had to be extremely talented in order to be able to take on the role. At this time, around the moon-worshipping sect's saintess, 6 of the 9 great divine Magisprius of the moon-worshipping sect had come. 6 powerful martial arts masters were enough to make people breathless. 2 of the top 4 existences of the moon-worshipping sect had come. One could imagine the importance that the moon-worshipping sect attached to this matter. And it was not over yet. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the demonic path's side. It sounded like the voice of Buddha, but it contained an evil feeling that made people feel lustful. A middle-aged man in a black kasaya with long hair descended from the sky. 6 different expressions were changing on his face. Some were happy, some were angry, and some were greedy. It was like a mask that changed continuously, and it was incomparably mysterious. Seeing this person, the expressions of Su Du and Su Yen from the Great Light Temple turned serious. This person was the sect leader of the 6th demon sect, Mara-e Buishuan. In terms of reputation, the 6th demon sect on the isolated island in Hainan was not very famous. E Buishuan's reputation was also far from Wei Shuya and Dong Huang Tai's. However, only the people from the Great Light Temple knew how terrifying the 6th demon sect was. They were definitely a formidable opponent of the Great Light Temple. Apart from these few powerhouses, the demonic path had come in full force. The powerhouses of the Rakshasa sect, the 5 Venoms sect, the Omniscient sect, and the other large sects had sent their disciples. Almost every sect had a martial arts master present. There were dozens of martial arts masters on both sides, as well as several powerful existences at the true fire spirit refinement realm. The entire floating jade mountain was like gunpowder that could be ignited by a single spark. Shun Baochen looked at Dong Huang Tai and the others and said calmly, "The demonic path really thinks highly of our 5 major sword sections. They actually sent so many people. Why don't I see Yi Xiaonan? He's an old friend. This time, I want to experience his heaven-mending sutra." Dong Huang Tai said in a low voice, "You don't have the right to see the sect leader. If you want to experience the heaven-mending sutra, you'll have to risk your life to experience it. Shin Baochen, I'll only ask you one thing today. Will the 5 major sword sects hand over the demonic creation flag or not?" Dong Huang Tai's voice was very strange. It was like a muffled drum. His voice was like thunder echoing. Shin Baochen's lips curled into a smile. "Hand it over? Why should we hand it over? The demonic creation flag was snatched by our 5 major sword sects from the Kunlun devil cult in the past. If you want it, come and get it." Dong Huang Tai took a step forward and said coldly, "It's always been the demonic path that plans in the dark, but this time, it's the 5 major sword sects who initiated the provocation. Floating Jade Mountain has turned into a river of blood. The one to blame is not the demonic path, but the 5 major sword sects." Shin Baochen shook his head. "How can we slay demons and defend justice without bloodshed? However, I believe that the ones who bleed the most on Floating Jade Mountain today will not be the 5 major sword sects, but the demonic path demons like you." With that, Shin Baochen said softly, "Activate the sword array." When the 3 words were spoken, the entire Floating Jade Mountain began to tremble. Instantly, multicolored light shone brightly, and sword chi surged into the sky. Chapter 398. The 5 major sword sects had teamed up to plot against the demonic cultivators. Even if Yi Xiaonan was here, the 5 major sword sects would have more trump cards waiting for them, let alone Yi Xiaonan. As Shun Baochen's voice fell, the entire Floating Jade Mountain was covered in dense array patterns. The strangest thing was that long swords rose into the air. There were tens of thousands of them, and the weakest one of them was a precious weapon. This was Storm Sword Tomb's Immortal Execution Myriad Swords Array. It was called Immortal Execution, but now it was used to suppress the demons. The 5 major sword sects had put in a lot of effort for this. The tens of thousands of precious weapons were almost all gathered by Hidden Sword Villa and Storm Sword Tomb. After all, these 2 sects had the most precious weapons and longswords. When the Immortal Execution Myriad Swords Array was activated, the demonic cultivators near the edge immediately wailed and were immediately killed. In midair, the long swords fell like meteors, killing and dismembering the demonic cultivators one by one. When he saw this, Wei Shuya shouted, "Attack!" As Wei Shuya's voice fell, the hidden Devil Clan cultivators who were originally hidden in the crowd, such as Mr. Liu, all revealed themselves and began to attack the people from the 5 major sword sects. In an instant, they dealt a devastating blow to the cultivators from the 5 major sword sects. In fact, the people from the 5 major sword sects had long been on guard. They also knew that the phaseless demon sect cultivators were good at concealment, and they were most likely hidden in the crowd. However, the people from the 5 major sword sects did not expect that there would be so many people hidden. With the help of the phaseless demon sect, the other hidden Devil Clan cultivators also disguised themselves to the extreme, so that the people from the 5 major sword sects could not discover them. This caused them to suffer losses and suffer significant losses. The old guard from Storm Sword Tomb did not say anything. He slashed out with the dirty longsword in his hand, bringing with it a powerful sword light that could cut through the heavens and earth. It was dazzling and almost covered the entire floating jade mountain. Wuxia laughed coldly. Demonic chi surged around him and his palm covered the sky. He grabbed the sword light and tore it apart. As the two of them fought, Dong Huangtai and Yi Buoxuan also fought with Dugu Li and Shin Baochen respectively. Dong Huangtai didn't have a weapon, but his wide sleeves seemed to be able to cover the sky and contain everything, devouring all of Dugu Li's sword aura. Moreover, Dong Huangtai's own cultivation method was very special. It was not a pure demonic cultivation method. Instead, it was mixed with a strand of divinity, just like Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avicii, which had been cultivated to the extreme. As Dong Huangtai pushed his cultivation method to its limits, the illusory figure of a 100-meter-tall demon god appeared behind him. It had no legs, but its body was huge and its arms were long and narrow. The body condensed from black demonic energy had a pair of deep golden eyes. As the golden light shone, whether it was the power of the world or Dugu Li's powerful sword chi, they were all destroyed. As soon as they started fighting, Dong Huangtai had already started to suppress Dugu Li. This scene shocked everyone on the scene. The current East Emperor Tai was known as the most powerful among all divine magus priests, and he was strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the high priest. Now it seemed that he deserved his reputation. On the other side, Mara Yi Buoxuan was also fighting Shin Baochen with great intensity. The 6th demon sect was far away on an isolated island in Hainan and kept a low profile. They rarely involved themselves with matters related to the Central Plains warriors, so some of the warriors present did not know much about the 6th demon sect. This included Shin Baochen, who was also fighting a warrior from the 6th demon sect for the first time. The demonic energy around Yi Buoxuan surged, and wisps of mysterious aura burst forth. He did not fight Shin Baochen head-on at all. He formed a seal with his hands and the 4 heavens Wang Tian, Lili Tian, Yama Tian, Tusita Tian, Huala Tian and Mahasvara Tian appeared. The 6 heavens of the Desire Realm surrounded Shin Baochen, and they seemed real and illusory at the same time. If Shin Baochen did not pay attention, he would be pulled into them. Although Shin Baochen's cultivation in the way of the sword and his unswerving determination would not cause him to fall into them, he still could not find a way to completely break out of the 6 heavens of the Desire Realm. This made him feel very depressed. The 6 powerful existences in the true fire spirit refinement realm were fighting, and it seemed that the 5 major sword sects were at a disadvantage. Wuxia fought head-on with the elder of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, and the fight was spectacular. Dong Huangtai was suppressing Dugu Li. On the other side, Yi Buoxuan's attacks were extremely strange, and he was also entangled with Shin Baochen. In this way, the 5 major sword sects were already in danger. Moreover, the real danger for the 5 major sword sects was not on the side of the high-level cultivators, but on the side of the other cultivators. The 5 major sword sects had indeed made ample preparations this time. The cultivators of the 5 sects had gathered together, and they had the assistance of the immortal extermination myriad swords formation. However, it was a pity that they had to face the entire demonic Tao. There was the extremely powerful moon-worshipping cult, and the low-key but powerful 6th demon sect, as well as the evil extreme sect, 5 poison cult, Rakshasa sect, and other demonic Tao sections. Although these sects did not turn out in full force, each sect had used more than half of their strength, and their power could be said to be astonishing. Moreover, the hidden devil lineage was not weak either. Although they were few in number, they grouped together in 2s and 3s, and used all kinds of strange methods to secretly attack and kill the cultivators of the 5 major sword sects. There were many vicious and merciless demonic Tao villains in the hidden devil lineage. In the past they would still keep a low profile and endure, but now they all emerged and began to wantonly kill. Among them, the most outstanding performance was from the moon-worshipping cult. Although the hidden devil lineage did not admit it, among all the demonic Tao sects, there was indeed no demonic Tao sect that could compare to the moon-worshipping cult. And the moon-worshipping cult was the only existence in the demonic Tao that could compete with the Buddhist and Taoist lineages. The saintess of the moon-worshipping cult danced her graceful body. She wore a small silver bell on her wrist, and held an exquisite jade drum in her hand. As she danced and beat it, it produced strange syllables. After hearing the sound, the goo insects around her became even more bloodthirsty and ferocious. Even the cultivators at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm could not resist, and were instantly gnawed into a pile of white bones. There was a martial Tao grandmaster who wanted to deal with the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult first, but she was surrounded by the 6 god magus priests of the moon-worshipping cult. Those were 6 martial Tao grandmasters. Among the 5 major sword sects, the Hidden Sword Villa and the Yu Palace, which were the weakest, did not even have 6 martial Tao grandmasters. How could they fight? The more they fought, the uglier the expressions of the people from the 5 major sword sects became. They had still underestimated the demonic Tao. They had miscalculated. In recent years, the demonic Tao had been suppressed. Other than the powerful sects like the moon-worshipping cult, which could be more at ease, and the sects that were far away from the central plains like the 6th demon sect, which could be more relaxed, the other demonic Tao sects had to tuck their tails between their legs and behave. Sects like the extreme evil sect and the 5 poison sect usually kept a low profile, and the demonic Tao villains of the hidden devil lineage also acted cautiously. Usually they did not dare to surface at all. Only the scale of the phaseless demon sect dared to come out and cause trouble in the dark. Therefore, the performance of the demonic Tao gave the 5 major sword sects an illusion that the demonic Tao was very weak. It was really weak to the extreme. In the end, the 5 major sword sects realized that a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. When the demonic Tao was really forced into a corner, the powerful strength that they revealed was still shocking. However, the people from the 5 major sword sects were already in a difficult position. The fight had already reached such a stage. What else could they do? Retreat? While Shen Baochen was entangled with Yi Buoxuan, he said in a clear voice, "Are you all still going to stand by and watch? The demonic Tao has already become so powerful. Do you all still want to watch another Kunlun devil cult appear in the underworld?" Shen Baochen's words were directed at the warriors from the other sections. In fact, in the beginning, these people did not want to participate in the battle between the 5 major sword sects and the demonic Tao. However, now that they saw the power that the demonic Tao had displayed, these people were filled with fear. They did not believe Shen Baochen's words about another Kunlun devil cult appearing. How could the Kunlun devil cult appear so easily? However, the might displayed by the demonic lineage had indeed exceeded their imagination. It was time to suppress them a little. The battle of orthodoxies in the underworld had always been cruel. The Buddhist and Taoist sects had conflicts with each other. The relationship between the 5 major sword sects and the Buddhist and Taoist sects was not very good. However, in general they all had the same label, which was that they were orthodox sections. Therefore, now that the demonic Tao had become so powerful, even if it was not for the sake of exterminating demons and protecting the righteous path, they had to act for their own selfish desires. The Great Light Temple was the first to act. In fact, even if Shen Baochen did not say it, the Great Light Temple was prepared to act. There were 2 reasons. One was that the Great Light Temple had an extremely strong enmity towards the demonic Tao, and the other was that there were people from the 6th demon sect among the people who came this time. The martial arts of the Buddhist lineage had a natural restraining effect on the demonic Tao martial artists, and the martial arts of the 6th demon sect was a strong restraint on the Buddhist lineage. Therefore, the Great Light Temple saw the 6th demon sect martial artists as a thorn in their side. It was fine if they did not see them, but when they did, they naturally had to act. With the Great Light Temple taking the lead, other than the unaffiliated martial artists who were still somewhat wavering, the rest of the orthodox sects almost all joined the battle and began to kill the demonic Tao martial artists. Seeing this, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Shen Baochen's mouth. The strength of the demonic Tao was something that Shen Baochen and the other people from the 5 major sword sects did not expect. However, since they had acted, they certainly had more than one set of preparations. The martial artists who came to watch the ceremony were also part of their preparations. There was strength in numbers. This was the truth no matter where it was. Although the 5 major sword sects were very confident, they were still prepared to pull the other sects into the fray. If the 5 major sword sects won, these people could serve as spectators to show the might of the 5 major sword sects. On the contrary, if there were any changes to the plan, these people could also be used as external help. After all, the orthodox and demonic sects could not coexist. At this time and in this kind of situation, no sect would dare to hold back and not act. This was only a backup plan of the 5 major sword sects. They did not expect that an accident would really happen. They had no choice but to use the power of the martial artists present. Chapter 399. The process of the World Sword Sect Conference turning into a war between the righteous and demonic sects on Floating Jade Mountain was as simple as that. As the other righteous sects attacked, the entire Floating Jade Mountain was like a meat grinder. People were being killed almost every second. It was extremely cruel. However, the 5 major sword sects finally managed to turn the tables. However, on the side of the true fire spirit refinement stage powerhouse, Du Guli had been suppressed by Dong Huang Tai to the point where he could barely breathe. The king of Jianan, Du Guli, was once a powerhouse who dominated the pugilistic world. He was once a madman who dared to attack the northern Yen alone to demand an explanation. The fact that Du Guli was still alive was enough to prove his talent and strength. However, it was a pity that Du Guli had encountered Dong Huang Tai, who was even more talented and stronger than him. The demonic gods, I could destroy all living things. Such an evil martial art was something that Du Guli had no way of dealing with. No matter how strong his sword Dao was, it was destroyed by the Eastern Emperor Tai's demonic god's golden eye. Dong Huang Tai closed in casually. He raised his wide black sleeves and floated in midair. As his wide sleeves pressed down, it was as if half of Floating Jade Mountain had entered his sleeves. The sky suddenly darkened. Du Guli immediately felt a strong pressure coming from all directions. He had no time to think. The long sword in his hand spun and wisps of golden flames were released. Sword chi burned in the air. Sky-burning sword technique. However, before Du Guli could fully display the sky-burning sword technique, an explosion came from around him. A majestic demonic aura seemed to have appeared out of thin air and pressed him into the ground. The entire Floating Jade Mountain trembled and a crack appeared on the mountain. A martial arts grandmaster could split a river with a single sword and shatter a mountain with a single punch. Although it was only a small mountain that was shattered, the power of a martial arts grandmaster was already terrifying enough. The Floating Jade Mountain was huge. Even if more than 10 martial Dao masters attacked it together, they would not be able to shatter it. However, now that there were 6 existences at the level of Dong Huang Tai, it did not seem difficult for them to completely shatter the entire Floating Jade Mountain. Du Guli, who was smashed into the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. Ever since he had been seriously injured in the northern Yen, Du Guli had rarely fought. Therefore, it had been a long time since he had experienced the taste of being seriously injured. Now he had finally tasted it again. Dong Huang Tai stepped forward, wanting to kill Du Guli once and for all. However, at that moment, the tomb keeper who had been paying attention to the battle suddenly shouted, "Bring out the abyssal sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Yan Ji, who had been fighting with the 6th Heavenly Demon Sect's martial artist, immediately retreated. He bit his finger and pressed it against his forehead. In an instant, a golden light bloomed and the ground of the arena beneath him split open. A pitch-black longsword rose from the cracked ground. Although it was called a longsword, the longsword's appearance was very strange. It was like an incomplete sword embryo. The blade and hilt of the sword were both black iron in color. Even the blade was crooked and unsharpened. However, this long sword carried an incomparably ferocious aura. Only the heavens knew how much slaughter this sword had been stained with. This sword was the peerless sword of the Storm Sword Mound, the murderous weapon abyssal. Ranked 6th in the world-famous sword manual, the murderous weapon abyssal. According to the legends, the murderous weapon abyssal wasn't forged by man. Instead, it was born on an island in the North Sea in a bottomless abyss. Its original form was an iron rod made of an unknown material. However, it was extremely sturdy. Not only could it contain any type of chi, but it could also absorb the power of heaven and earth. It could be called a rare treasure. However, ever since this iron rod was brought out, it seemed to have a curse on it. Anyone who possessed it would die a violent death. The iron rod was also stained with countless amounts of blood. Later on, it was obtained by a Grandmaster Swordcrafting Master. That Grandmaster Swordcrafting Master refined it into a sword as if he had obtained a priceless treasure. However, because the material was too sturdy, it was very difficult to refine. That Grandmaster Swordcrafting Master spent a lot of effort to forge it into a sword embryo. However, before he could truly start refining it, that Grandmaster Swordcrafting Master was already killed. However, at this time, although the murderous abyss was still a sword embryo, it had already taken shape. Moreover, because the sword was stained with countless amounts of blood, the murderous chi on the murderous abyss was extremely dense. Anyone who obtained it would be affected by it and become a madman who only knew how to kill. Moreover, at this time, everyone knew the special characteristics of the murderous abyss. Not only could it absorb the power of heaven and earth, it could also absorb the chi and blood of martial artists as nourishment. Sometimes, if its owner did not kill enough, the murderous abyss would even affect its owner, forcing them to go on a killing spree. With this kind of behavior, the murderous abyss could already be said to be a murderous weapon among murderous weapons. The last master of the murderous abyss had died at the hands of Storm Sword Mound. The murderous abyss had also been suppressed by the people of Storm Sword Mound using the powerful sword intent of the Land of Buried Swords. In all these years, the number of times that Storm Sword Mound had used the murderous abyss could be counted on one's fingers. Normally, unless it was a critical moment, they would not be willing to use the murderous abyss. After all, a murderous weapon was a murderous weapon. It was something that harmed others as well as oneself. Using the murderous abyss was not a good thing for the user as it would harm their chi and blood. Moreover, if an accident happened and caused the murderous abyss to go out of control, it would cause unimaginable losses. This time the 5 great sword sects were also serious. Before setting up the trap, Storm Sword Mound had already brought the murderous abyss with them. However, they did not want to use it. But looking at the situation now, if they did not use the murderous abyss, the 5 great sword sects would not be able to hold on much longer. Yanji used his blood as a guide to activate the murderous abyss. In an instant, the murderous abyss exploded with a terrifying murderous power. The crimson power dyed the pitch-black murderous abyss red. In the blink of an eye, the murderous abyss that was suspended in mid-air disappeared. However, in the next moment, it had already appeared in front of Dong Huang Tai. Dong Huang Tai's wide sleeves danced and his body turned into a black mist. The murderous abyss flashed through the black mist. It did not hurt Dong Huang Tai, but it completely shattered the demonic shadow behind him. A strange look appeared in Dong Huang Tai's eyes. Murderous abyss? Your Storm Sword Mound has prepared quite well this time. Unfortunately, no matter how strong a weapon is, it is still a dead object. You want to turn the tide with a single weapon of death? Dream on. As soon as he finished speaking, demonic aura surged around Dong Huang Tai. His entire person disappeared within the boundless demonic aura. The majestic demonic aura covered the sky, almost enveloping the entire floating jade mountain within it. Once true fire and spirit ascension realm cultivators fought, their power was simply terrifying. After this battle, the entire floating jade mountain would probably be destroyed by them. The cultivators of both the righteous and demonic sides were engaged in a fierce battle. At this moment, Chu Xiu was slacking off. At a time like this, Chu Xiu would not be so idiotic as to reveal his identity. He had to make good use of his identity as a member of the righteous and demonic sections. Before this, Mr. Liu had already sent a voice transmission to Chu Xiu, asking him to use this opportunity to help him get rid of someone. Chu Xiu had also agreed. After all, he did not like that guy very much. That person was Mr. Shan Yin of the 5 Venoms sect, Cho Xiangzi. The 5 Venoms sect seemed to have some conflicts with the Phaseless Demon sect, and Cho Xiangzi was also an old enemy of Mr. Liu. Previously, during the Demonic Alliance conference, both sides had fought. However, at that time Chu Xiu had to hide his identity so he could not kill. Moreover, with so many demonic cultivators present, Chu Xiu could not kill. Now was the perfect time. Although right now was the time for the demonic sects to join forces to fight against the righteous sects, and Chu Xiu killing one of his own was somewhat unethical, neither Chu Xiu nor Mr. Liu felt guilty. Whether Chu Xiu, who was pretending to be a rising star of the demonic sects, counted as a member of the demonic sects or not, even Chu Xiu himself could not be sure. However, right now this identity was advantageous to Chu Xiu, so Chu Xiu was prepared to continue pretending. As for Mr. Liu, he had wanted to kill Cho Xiangzi for a long time. The 5 Venoms sect was backed by the moon-worshipping sect, and they had found such a big backer by being a dog for the moon-worshipping sect. This made the people of the Phaseless Demon sect very unhappy. Now that they had gotten rid of Cho Xiangzi, they could at least vent their anger. So in the chaotic battle between both sides, Chu Xiu fought and retreated, and finally found Cho Xiangzi's figure. At this time Cho Xiangzi was very happy killing. The martial arts of the 5 Venoms sect were very useful in this kind of chaotic battle. Once the 5 Venoms true chi was released, it would immediately affect a large number of people. He would kill whoever was poisoned the most. Some of the poisonous insects in his body needed to be fed with blood. Usually he did not have the chance and did not have the guts to kill so many righteous martial artists to feed his poisonous insects. This time Cho Xiangzi had gotten back what he had lost. At this time Cho Xiangzi was surrounded by poisonous mist as he chased a Ba Mountain Sword Sect 5 Chis towards the source martial artist. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist was about to collapse. He had clearly come to participate in the World Sword Sect conference. How did this place become a battlefield in the blink of an eye, and everyone started to kill? This martial artist did not understand, so he could only run for his life. In the outside world, a 5 cheese towards the source martial artist could be called an expert, but in a place like this, even a martial arts grandmaster could not escape unscathed, much less a 5 cheese towards the source martial artist. Just as Cho Xiangzi was about to reach the Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist, a golden handprint fell down, and instantly defeated all the poisonous insects and goo in front of him. Chu Xiu's figure blocked in front of Cho Xiangzi. This caused Cho Xiangzi and the 5 cheese towards the source martial artist to be stunned. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect martial artist did not seem to think that the one who saved him was Chu Xiu, who had some enmity with the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Had Chu Xiu changed his personality? He did not seem to be as bad as the sect said. As for Cho Xiangzi, he felt that Chu Xiu was somewhat familiar. While Chu Xiu had attacked many times on the stage because of the distance, Cho Xiangzi did not pay much attention. But now he truly felt that Chu Xiu's presence was somewhat familiar. Chapter 400. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior was shocked by Chu Xiu's help. Thinking of how he and the others had wanted to make trouble for Chu Xiu before, the Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior could not help but feel ashamed. The warrior bowed to Chu Xiu in a grateful and guilty tone. "Thank you, Master Chu, for not holding grudges against us and saving us." Chu Xiu waved his hand and put on a righteous and magnanimous expression. "I do have some grievances with the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, but those are personal grievances. You and I are both righteous warriors. Facing these murderers of the demonic path, we should put down our past grievances and work together against the enemy." The Ba Mountain Sword Sect warrior nodded fiercely upon hearing this. His gaze towards Chu Xiu changed slightly. The rumors in the Jianghu had always said that Chu Xiu was too vicious and heartless, and did not seem like someone of the righteous path. But now it seemed that this Master Chu could still distinguish between righteousness and personal grievances. He was definitely not as bad as the rumors said. At this time, Cho Xiangzi did not have the mind to consider why he found Chu Xiu familiar. Cho Xiangzi sneered and said, "Chu Xiu, your Guanzhong torture room is not of the righteous path, and belongs to a neutral faction. The battle on Floating Jade Mountain has nothing to do with you, but you insist on interfering. Do you want to die?" Chu Xiu took a step forward and said righteously, "Who says the Guanzhong torture room is not of the righteous path? Everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the world. The safety of the righteous path must be shouldered by us. You murderers of the demonic path are so arrogant. I think you are the ones who want to die." Chu Xiu's words were righteous as though he really was a hero of the righteous path. Cho Xiangzi sneered when he heard this. The 5 poison genuine qi around his body erupted. Amidst the colorful poisonous mist, there were also ear-piercing cries of insects. Surprisingly, there were many evil poisonous insects hidden in the poisonous mist. Cho Xiangzi had seen Chu Xiu fight before, but at that time the demonic path had not completely invaded Floating Jade Mountain. As the hidden devil sect, the 5 poison sect, of course, would not be able to see it clearly like Mr. Liu and the others. Cho Xiangzi was watching from a big tree on the cliff. Because of the distance, he couldn't feel how strong Chu Xiu's power was. It was very vague. Cho Xiangzi couldn't even see the details of his attack. At most, he could only see the final result. However, in his opinion, Chu Xiu was not at the level of Fang Qishao. He was only at the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Even if he was strong, how strong could he be? With this thought in mind, Cho Xiangzi did not even use his full strength. He only used 80% of it. Of course, he did not waste the other 20% of his strength. Instead, he was constantly paying attention to the movements around him, afraid that someone would sneak up on him. Although the people fighting the demonic path were all disciples of the righteous path, they were all warriors. Putting aside their own orthodoxy, who would not be more vicious than the other. At that moment, Chu Xiu took a step forward, and his figure actually merged into the poisonous mist. Before Cho Xiangzi could mock Chu Xiu for courting death, a blinding Buddhist light had already bloomed in the poisonous mist, tearing it apart and shattering the poisonous insects. Buddhist martial arts again. Seeing this scene, Cho Xiangzi was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was not weak in the 5 poison sect. In terms of cultivation, Cho Xiangzi was almost half a step into the Grandmaster realm. Few warriors of the same level could beat him. However, now that he had met his nemesis, Chou Xiangzi felt very helpless. He had already deliberately avoided the group of monks from the Great Light Temple, but he did not expect that he would meet someone who was leading the way and was also using Buddhist martial arts. At the thought of this, Chou Xiangzi subconsciously thought of the detestable kid called Lin Yi that Lu Jin had brought. That guy also seemed to be proficient in Buddhist martial arts. However, before Chou Xiangzi could think further, Chu Xiu had already conjured the Great Vajra Wheel Seal and attacked Chou Xiangzi repeatedly. Previously at the Demonic Path meeting, because Chu Xiu needed to hide his identity, he did not use his signature fast and slow 9 words formula. Instead, he only used the Great Vajra superpower that he had just learned. Although the few Dharma forms formed by the Great Vajra superpower were not weak, they were not as handy as the fast and slow 9 words formula. For example, Chu Xiu used the glazed golden silk goo to restrain the poisonous goo and the Buddhist martial arts to restrain Chou Xiangzi. A series of attacks directly suppressed Chou Xiangzi to the extreme. The more Chou Xiangzi fought, the more aggrieved he felt. His cultivation was actually considered to be half a step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, at least in terms of using poison. Warriors of the same level who were one with heaven and man would be afraid of his poison techniques and would be restrained when fighting him. However, Chu Xiu seemed to be immune to all poisons. Chou Xiangzi's poison techniques could not do anything to him at all. Therefore, when he felt that he had been suppressed to the extreme, Chou Xiangzi made a prompt decision to immediately escape and let the others deal with Chu Xiu. There were so many righteous experts on floating Jade Mountain. Chou Xiangzi could go and kill others to gain credit. There was no need for him to fight to the death with Chu Xiu here. However, since Chu Xiu had the intention to kill, how could he let Chou Xiangzi leave so easily? Just as Chou Xiangzi was about to retreat, Chu Xiu formed the lion seal with his hand. In an instant, a thunderous explosion was heard, causing Chou Xiangzi's body to tremble. He could not help but grunt, and a ruthless look appeared in his eyes. Since Chu Xiu was unwilling to let him off, then he wanted to see who would be the one to die in the end. As a demonic martial artist from the Five Poisons sect, Chou Xiangzi's personality was naturally cruel and ruthless. He had wanted to retreat earlier only because he realized that Chu Xiu was proficient in Buddhist martial arts and would be at a disadvantage if he fought him. However, since Chu Xiu was persistent, he would use his trump card and see who would emerge victorious in the end. The moment he turned around, Chou Xiangzi blasted out with both palms and a large amount of poisonous fog erupted, meeting Chu Xiu's Great Vajra Wheel Seal. There was an explosion of Buddhist light, and Chou Xiangzi's poisonous fog was completely shattered. However, at this moment, 2 palm-sized golden snakes rushed out of the poisonous fog and attacked Chu Xiu. The 2 palm-sized golden snakes were extremely fast and arrived in front of Chu Xiu in almost an instant. Chu Xiu formed the Dugu seal with his hand, but the strange thing was that the 2 snakes completely ignored Chu Xiu's Gangqi defense and continued to attack him. Frowning, Chu Xiu raised the heavenly demon dance in his hand as he retreated. However, the astral blade demonic chi had almost no effect on the 2 golden snakes. With 2 clangs, the 2 golden snakes were sent flying by Chu Xiu, but there was only a white mark on their bodies. The attack from a 6th transformation treasure weapon had little effect on them. Chou Xiangzi couldn't help but sneer when he saw this. These 2 golden snakes were a mutated species he found in the mountains of Miaojiang. They were called little Vajra snakes. They were impervious to Gangqi and 100 weapons. Although they were not ferocious beasts, they had all kinds of strange powers. However, feeding these little Vajra snakes was too difficult. They only ate bone marrow, and it was the bone marrow of martial artists. The stronger the better. Even if Chou Xiangzi killed people every day, he couldn't afford to feed them. Most of the time, he let the 2 little Vajra snakes sleep temporarily and only used them at critical moments. Although Chou Xiangzi would have to kill people everywhere to find bone marrow to feed these 2 little Vajra snakes, it was worth it as long as he could kill Chu Xiu. It must be known that although Chu Xiu was not a big shot of the righteous sects, he was still one of the top 10 elites on the Longhu list. Killing him would be a great credit. The 2 little Vajra snakes pounced on Chu Xiu again under the command of Chou Xiangzi's Gangqi. But this time Chu Xiu did not move. The power of the soul-shifting technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth erupted. In an instant, the 2 little Vajra snakes were bleeding from their mouths and noses. They twitched for a while and then stopped moving. These things were not afraid of Gangqi and were impervious to 100 weapons. Could it be that their mental strength was so strong? Chou Xiangzi's heart was bleeding at the sight of this. Back then, for the sake of these 2 little Vajra snakes, Chou Xiangzi risked being chased by righteous martial artists to kill them and extract their bone marrow. Only then did he manage to feed them and keep them alive. But now they both died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu, I will kill you. Chou Xiangzi roared and took the initiative to attack Chu Xiu. However, although Chou Xiangzi was angry, he was not an idiot. He was not good at close combat, so he would not fight to the death with Chu Xiu. After approaching Chu Xiu, a scarlet blood light burst out of Chou Xiangzi's sleeve and went straight for Chu Xiu. The scarlet blood light looked like sword qi, but upon a closer look, it was actually a ferocious blood-colored centipede the size of a dagger and a foot long. This thing was called the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede. It was a secret poisonous insect refined by the 5 Poisons Order. It was fed with blood essence and supported by countless poisonous creatures. During this period, the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede could not die. Although the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede refined by Chou Xiangzi did not really reach 10,000 kinds of poison, it still had thousands of kinds. Its power was very strong. It could not be said to kill upon contact. The 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede had not been completely refined by Chou Xiangzi. Using it now would affect the growth of the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede. However, at this moment he hated Chu Xiu to the extreme, so he couldn't care about anything else. This time he had to kill Chu Xiu. However, before the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede could reach him, Chou Xiangzi's eyes widened in disbelief. The 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede, which he regarded as his last base, was easily clamped between 2 fingers by Chu Xiu. The ferocious 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede was like a weak little insect in Chu Xiu's hands. It was actually trembling there. As Chu Xiu's fingers moved slightly, the 1,000 Poison Blood Centipede was directly split into 2 by Chu Xiu's Gang Qi. No! Chou Xiangzi roared angrily, but it was too late. It should be said that Chou Xiangzi's decision to use these poisonous creatures and goo worms to deal with Chu Xiu was a mistake. The glazed gold silk goo in Chu Xiu's body had an innate suppressive effect on all kinds of poisonous creatures and goo worms. Unless the goo worm's level was higher than the glazed gold silk goo, these poisonous creatures and goo worms were all trash in front of Chu Xiu. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.